This program was recorded on Monday, August 17th, in the year of our Lord, 2015. The opinions expressed by the participants in the following program do not necessarily represent that of this station or its management.
Or anybody else.
From the John DeVita Recording Studio, located in an undisclosed and clandestine location on the great northwest side of our fair city of Chicago, we once again are pleased to be presenting yet another edition of our monthly roundtable panel discussion show, Meet the Chicago Historians. Now, here's the guy who started it all, John DeVita.
Well, thank you, Rich. From the John DeVita Broadcast Center, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another broadcast of Meet the Chicago Historians on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Monday, August the 17th, the year of our Lord, 2015. Today, the panel will be talking about how we did our shopping and banking in the good old days. And now to start today's broadcast, here's our announcer, Mr. Richard Lang.
And now, here's our panel moderator, Jack Red Ryan. Jack?
Thank you, Rich. Thank you, John. This is where the buck passing stops. Welcome, everybody, everyone listening.
That's where it started.
All teens of you. It's good. We're good to be back for our monthly get-together. We hope you enjoyed half as much as we do. And today, as usual, we start off with we'll start off with a Musketeer roll call. Which way do we go? We start here.
Yeah,
Bill?
why not?
Yeah, all right, okay.
You.
Bill Kugelman. I was the chief of the 10th Battalion or Fire Department for 46 years. After that, I retired and was very upset because my dad always told me it was a steady job, and I wanted to keep going. But that was 15 years ago.
They got tired of you, that's all.
No, they were afraid that I might call for another strike, like I did in 1980.
Okay.
Were you an umpire?
Huh?
You were an umpire, huh?
Yeah.
Balls.
No
What else did you
balls,
do? You
huh?
did some
Well,
other,
I was president of the Fire Museum. I was president of Local 2, the Firemen's Union. And at the present time, I'm just going along, riding the waves.
had a little law enforcement.
You're the Navy.
Oh, yes. I was, while I was on the fire department, on my days off, which were many, we had good hours, even though we worked 56 hours a week. But anyway, I was deputy director of the Illinois Bureau of Racetrack Police and still work for the racing board. Yes.
You're a real thoroughbred.
I love
Very-
that job.
Yeah.
I love that job.
The racing board has workers?
Oh, I worked out in, lived out in Rolling Meadows. Shh, don't tell the city. And
Ex post
had
facto.
a nice swimming pool in the backyard. And I'd come home from the firehouse, take a dip, and then go to work at the racetrack with all of the handicappers.
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm shocked.
good life.
Shocked to hear you were living out of the city.
Oh, well, then I moved to Arlington Heights for a while.
And
but,
that's,
they caught me there, too.
Yeah, well, the statute of limitations is running all that stuff, hasn't
I
it?
thought
I
Rolling Meadows.
think so.
I thought that was one of those neighborhoods on the northwest side, isn't it?
Rolling
Meadows?
Yeah.
I thought
Well-
Great town.
Speaking,
Really a
okay,
good town.
you're next up then, sir.
My name is John Escacholco, and I served in government and was active in politics for many years in the great town of Cicero. I served in the Illinois General Assembly in the House of Representatives, and I was town assessor. And I served a stint on the great old WJJG,
What was that last part?
that great radio station.
WJJG.
G, yeah.
Who is that named after? What I mean, all those.
I believe it was named after John DeVita, if I'm not mistaken. He was the station manager, but of course, actually, it was Joseph J. Gentile
Correct.
was the patron of WJJG, where this show began.
Yes, sir.
And I'm glad to be here.
Chicago area, very successful car dealer. Chet Kopic dubbed him the Baron of Barrington. Correct? Was it a Buick dealership? Was it, John?
Chrysler Plymouth.
Huh? Chrysler Plymouth. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I know one of those cars I had. And he was also, I should call him a philanthropist. I mean, the radio station was like sharing with everybody other things. Plus, he's very much contributed to both Loyola University and St. Ignatius.
Yes,
right.
a lot of places you go, you'll see that Joe Gentile was a benefactor.
He and Bob Newhart kind of got together, and they were going to close St. Ignatius, and they kept it open, and now it's regentrified.
Oh,
I had an opportunity to be at WJJG in the final years, and I got to meet him and talk with him a number of times. He would sit out there on the veranda of his estate, Villa Gentile, the building was called. So I was glad to have that opportunity to get to know him.
Joe, before he got to know me, he'd look at me and he'd go, Irish, right? You know, Irish and Italians didn't always hit it off so well. But then after a while, he got to know, I'm not so very bad, I guess. Half a German, too, so.
I used to take envelopes from my brother-in-law to Joe. They were great friends, and with my name, Joe said one day, he says, "How in the hell did you get in with that Irish bunch?" And I said, "Well, my mother-in-law introduces me as Bill Kugelman, Barbara's husband, and he's not Irish, but he's a good guy."
Yeah.
Coming from my mother-in-law, that
Well,
was
John,
something.
I tell John, half Irish, half German. You get drunk and then you forget who you wanted to attack.
There you go.
Hey, I like that one. Now, let's see. Father was Irish, mother was German, First, F-E-R-S-T, and my wife's from Western Kentucky. So I used to tell the kids they were little Irish-German hillbillies. Of course, they go to hit me. Next up, speaking of Germans,
Well, I'm your announcer, Rich Lang. I have a little teaching background in modern American and European history at the college level. And more recently, I'm a Chicago history buff, taking several years of classes with our old buddy, my mentor, Ken Little, at Wright College. And I just enjoy neighborhood Chicago history a lot.
and you also, are you still doing the radio?
Oh, that's right. I'm in a
reenactments?
group that recreates old-time radio shows. Those are the day's radio players.
You still doing that?
Still doing it. Oh, yeah.
Anything coming up with that, or?
Not until October. We'll be performing right in the Jefferson Park Congregational Church about October 12th. Going to do a little Halloween show for the
Where's that,
kids.
in Jefferson Park? Is that in Jefferson Park?
Well, the church is there, right off of Milwaukee and Lawrence.
You have to ask these days because sometimes the churches move and retain another name. Like in our neighborhood, we had Drexel Park Presbyterian Church, which formerly was over in what, Oakwood or one of those communities. This was at 64th and Marshfield in our day, and since then it's moved out to, I think, Tinley.
So they'd keep the old name.
Yeah, they do. They can retain it.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
and you're an announcer plus and plus. Plenty. You know, you do the announcing, and you also are a knowledgeable board member. I'll testify to that one.
Thank you. Thank
Next
you, Jack.
up, sir.
Thank you, Jack.
Name's Al Opitz. I used to work for the water department for the city of Chicago, and since I was Republican and not an Irishman, I was sort of unusual in the place.
How'd you wind up with a job with the city? With a
I think-
Republican on the city payroll?
Yeah. They were not too happy with me.
Token.
They're still looking for you.
Yep. And especially since Daley wasn't there yet. Well, the old man was gone, so that's nobody looked at your records.
I understand Richard J. used to look at all the applications that come across his desk, at least give him a little glance. Is that true?
Yet the first time he ran for public office, he ran as a Republican.
Yeah.
Right.
That's
That's right.
Because
And
What,
then
for
he-
sheriff?
the only
was it?
way he could, no, it was for a state representative. There
Yeah.
Was
was-
it?
yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
There was a vacancy for a Republican in the old multi-member district, and so he ran as a Republican. Then immediately, when he got to Springfield, announced that he was a Democrat.
Yeah.
Oh, did he make it then?
Yeah.
Oh, he
yeah.
did make it.
He
I
was
thought
elected.
I thought he
yeah.
lost his
Yeah.
first.
No, he was elected.
I don't know. We have to look him up.
First time he was elected. I'm not sure if he ran before that, but the first time he was elected,
Made it.
he
Okay.
ran as a
That
Republican.
sounds right.
Oh, that's a dirty trick.
Yeah.
Of course, you sometimes can't tell them apart down there in Springfield
No.
now.
No.
It sounded like Hillary Clinton. She ran as a Goldwater Republican.
Goldwater Republican as a young girl.
Yeah. Oh well. But anyways,
Those two names
Was it a
don't seem to
Coolidge
work in the same
Republican?
sentence.
No, Coolidge.
Was it
Oh.
Coolidge? Was Coolidge the first one that she? I'm not sure. It could have been Coolidge.
Just go back.
Yeah. Yes.
she-
Next, Tom.
Tom McKenna, lifelong friend of our moderator, Jack Ryan.
You
and
admit it?
again, one of the few people that actually admit to that.
Da-da-da-da-da.
Retired Chicago police officer. I had 20 great years in the Chicago Police Department, and 20 out of 34 isn't bad.
Thank you,
Very
Eddie
good.
Young.
How much bad time? Never mind that. And yeah, we did about everything together. Tom and I, grade school, softball, baseball, scouts, altar boys. What else? Coached
Don't
together.
forget track and cross country.
track and cross country,
Vi-
boys club.
Jack is a classic example of don't judge a book by its cover. John was on the track team and cross country team.
Well, it was good conditioning. I did score in one meet, though. You know, you score a cross country meet. If the first relay runner comes in 27th, remember they wrote that up in the paper. Cross country is scored like golf. The lower score is the best. First place 1, 2, 3, 4. A shutout is if you get 15. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's the way that's done. Anyone,
Yeah.
if that might be on the test, gang. So let's remember
Pay attention.
that could be cross country.
Well, they always say that if your golf score is like your same as your bowling score, one of the two sports is in trouble.
Or both. Or both of them.
And now you. Come on, Jack.
What?
You.
What about
Tell
me?
us
You're
about
here
yourself.
too. Tell
I don't
us
have
about
to do
yourself.
that. I'm exempt.
Oh,
Okay,
exempt rank.
34 years for the police department in varying roles, from the most crime-ridden area to the blowing a whistle downtown, three-wheel motorcycle, 2nd District, 21st District, 8th District, Chicago Lawn, the old 2nd District station where Tom and I both started, 4802 South Wabash, the new one, 51st and Wentworth, which I was in back in two, already dumped the when they moved into the new place in March of '70. I also worked in traffic. I worked in the youth division in the school unit, and I also wound up in the end missing persons, which was youth, which became part of the detective division. So I was in the patrol, youth, traffic, and detective divisions. I hit for the cycle there. How about that?
Tom,
When you're-
why did they put him in missing persons? I mean, was he missing all the time?
Yeah, usually.
Just couldn't find him?
Well, he has a great line about before he went into missing persons, when someone was reporting missing in Chicago, he was under the impression that someone actually went out and looked for him.
Yeah, like the TV shows, they have this dragnet out for the guy, and people looking all over.
Now they use a computer.
Children, they get on it immediately.
Yeah,
When your husband doesn't come home for a couple days, that's kind of on the back burner.
yeah. In Chicago, people didn't seem to realize it was the youth officers who were also handling the missing. So they get a stack like yay high. Although most of them aren't really missing. Go one of these homes or something. If the kid won't come in and standing in the yard, they want a missing persons on him, or they want to, if they don't see him for 5 minutes, that sort of thing. There are real cases that would be require some immediate action, such as tender age, and if it's a mental problem involved or something like that. We had
Alzheimer's.
one time Mercy Hospital called. They couldn't find. There was some Saudi Arabian prince who was here to get some kind of a surgery, So they finally called back. He was on another floor, but the name was misspelled. I said, "Oh, they had two Saudi Arabian princes there." It was like, you got to wonder. But then again, you can't blame them for covering their own. You know what? What it comes down to.
It sounded like me when I started working for the city. They misspelled my name, and it took me 6 months to correct it.
6 months to catch it.
No, 6 months to correct it. They didn't know how to spell.
You know what happens.
Did it mess up your paycheck, Al?
No, I just signed my regular name.
Oh, okay.
They cashed it. They didn't say anything.
Close enough for government work, huh?
Yeah.
Talk about missing persons. Last night, this morning I heard this, but last night there were, I guess, 4 guys swimming in Lake Michigan, and one guy just swam out too far, I guess, and the others missed him, called the police, the fire. They looked all night for the guy, and this morning they found him at home and in bed.
Right.
They just, the guy probably went back up on shore and didn't see anybody and went home and without telling his buddies.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that there is. Probably cost,
Yeah.
when they figure
Who
it
knows?
hundreds of thousands
Yeah.
of dollars.
Yeah, like how many times this happened? kid doesn't come home from school. Oh, he stayed overnight at his friend's house, but nobody bothers to tell the folks.
Yeah.
See? That sort of thing.
Yeah, that wouldn't be the first time that happened.
But we digress.
No.
Digress. What does that mean anyway?
I don't know. What?
Sounds good,
Is
doesn't
that
it?
something dirty?
Sounded impressive.
Digress.
Huh?
Yeah. Not like undress, digress.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, getting into our what we call recent history or current events.
VJ Day.
Yes, it
yeah.
was.
If any of you kids know,
70th anniversary.
70th anniversary. The war actually ended August 14th, but Truman declared VJ Day on the 15th. And the sad part about it is the Indianapolis ship was torpedoed because the Japanese didn't know the war ended.
And the Indianapolis was the cruiser that had delivered the atomic bomb, the first atomic bomb
right.
that was dropped on Hiroshima to the island of Tinian.
I have here for your perusal a sheet of paper from the Chicago Times, Monday, May 7th, 1945. And it
VE
is
Day.
called The War Day by Day. For you guys here at the table, I'm gonna have this copied, and it really is. I don't know where this ever was or who I got it from or where it came from, but it is very informative, and also how Chicago pointed the V in E. In other words, VE Day.
Victory in Europe.
That was
And,
when was
this
the,
is
May 7th.
this is really
May 8th,
something.
May 7th.
Yeah.
They
This is
surrendered
May
on May
7th.
7th to Eisenhower.
For the young folks, the Times, there were two newspapers at one time, the Chicago Sun, Chicago Times. They were later merged. Marshall Field was the publisher of the Chicago Sun, which came out like the first week, in first edition, the first week of December 1941. It was supposed to be a Democratic counterbalance to the then Republican Tribune.
Right.
However, once the war was out, we're all supposed to be united, so it
Well,
still existed. And
I worked for a guy. He graduated from Lane Tech along with my uncle, and they all went over to join the Army at the time. And my uncle, because he was a tool and die maker, and I'm not sure why, but they deferred him. And the other guy went to, he was a tool and die maker too, so that didn't make any sense. But he ended up doing training films for 4 years. And they decided they didn't need it anymore. They're going to ship them to the Far East. And he was on a boat going over there when they declared truce for VJ Day. So he lucked out all the way for 5 years in the service.
I came across some interesting thoughts on the surrender. Apparently the Navy very much wanted Nimitz to be the one to preside at the surrender ceremony. The Navy felt that the war in the Pacific had been primarily a naval war, and so the Secretary of the Navy, who was new on the job, Forrestal, and Nimitz felt that should have been the role for Fleet Admiral Nimitz. But the decision was made in Washington that MacArthur was the more recognized figure. He outranked Nimitz by date of rank. His 5-star rank was senior to Nimitz. And the feeling was that it was proper for MacArthur to be the one to preside at that ceremony. But the compromise was that the ceremony would take place on a warship. That's why it's on the battleship Missouri. That was the Navy's role in it. And it just so happened that the USS Missouri was right there in Tokyo Bay, and that was a good selling point with Harry Truman, that they had the battleship bearing the name of his home state that would be the site of the surrender ceremony. And finally, as a consolation prize, Nimitz got to sign the surrender document on behalf of the United States of America. MacArthur signs as Supreme Commander
Allied forces.
of all the nations, which
Yeah.
he had just been appointed that a few days earlier. He did not have that status during the war, but he had just been given that Supreme Commander status. So he signs as Supreme Commander. Nimitz then gets his walk-on and gets to sign as on behalf of the U.S.
Different officers got to sign, like for the Army, Navy, etc. So on.
No, it was no. The old Nimitz was each nation got her. So there was a British
nation.
representative, a French, and unfortunately a Russian. but Nimitz gets the sign for the United States, and Halsey got part of the pie because the Missouri was his flagship. So Halsey gets to be the host of the surrender ceremony. So he's the one greeting all the dignitaries. So they felt the Navy got its share of the recognition.
The Missouri's still in Pearl Harbor.
It's in Pearl Harbor.
And it faces the Arizona,
Right.
which was sunk. And
At
there
the
is
beginning of the war and the end of the war.
Yeah. The plaque is on the Missouri that shows where the table was where they signed the treaty. And I think all the Japanese soldiers ended up executed, or most of them were anyway.
I think there was a general named Shigemitsu. I think he was executed as a war criminal.
Yeah,
I'm not positive of that, but I think he was.
There's a couple.
And there was a civilian. There was the civilian representing the emperor who signed.
But MacArthur was quite a showman. There's always the photograph of him coming ashore in the Philippines. And I don't know how many retakes he did that before he got the one that he liked.
Yeah. that sort of thing was portrayed in Patton, where they show the captured film and these different takes of him stepping out of the with LST or LC, whatever,
I think when they
pointing this way and that
landed
way.
in
Yeah,
Sicily.
he was quite a showman. But there is a book out that I don't know the exact name of it, but it was sort of called MacArthur's Pearl Harbor. And on the 8th of December, the Japanese were going to attack, and MacArthur couldn't figure out which way to arm his airplanes at the time. And there's a book that's about an inch and a half thick of one day. And I don't know how this guy could do but he wrote a complete art. It must have been from second to second of everything that happened at the time.
This is in the Philippines now, you're talking about?
I believe it was.
It's in the 8th, yeah.
Yeah, MacArthur's. It's not his finest hour. The fact that his B-17 bombers at Clark Field were caught the next day, the day after Pearl Harbor. They're caught out on the airfield, sitting ducks for the Japanese, and there's never been an attempt to explain it. It was just a failing on his part.
Over the weekend, WTTW had
the war.
The Roosevelts.
Oh yeah.
Or Roosevelt,
Yeah.
however you want to pronounce
Roosevelt,
it.
yeah. It's,
And I watched part. I've been laid up, so I'm just watching the boob tube. And it was very, very interesting.
It's a good series.
that's
They
a real.
want $252 for the book and for the 17 or 14 CDs, but I watched the I think it was the number 6 and number 7,
That's at the end.
which was the end of it, and it was very interesting about
Very
Halsey
well done.
and the end of it. Oh,
Very well done.
anything that guy does.
And Edward Herman, who did
Ed Herman did Roosevelt,
Right.
FDR,
and he died. He died shortly after completing.
Yes.
He died around last Christmas.
Meryl Streep, and I couldn't see all of the different ones where they use their voices.
The voices.
I think
It
Paul
was
Giamatti
really
was
neat.
Teddy.
He was Teddy Roosevelt. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sort of interesting. Teddy was a Republican, and Franklin became a Democrat.
Again, the first time FDR ever voted for president, he voted Republican. He voted for Theodore Roosevelt.
Are you sure?
And Teddy's son,
Well,
Teddy
So he said.
Jr., I guess it was,
Ted Jr., yeah.
was completely against them. The Roosevelts had two factions, and one Hyde Park and one whatever the heck it was.
It all
the
started.
Rocky Knolls, and then later on, one of the commentators from WTTW, her name was Ann Roosevelt. She teaches at UIC, and I didn't get where she was in that line, but she said, "Oh yes, we have now come together at our different meetings, different family affairs," and she says, "And now we have a black Roosevelt family."
Yeah, I knew him. Used to work at the
I
43rd
don't know
Street.
where that was. And they didn't say. That's all she said, because it was off the.
What is Roosevelt? Is that a Dutch name?
Dutch.
Yeah, it's
think
Dutch.
so.
Dutch.
Yeah, they like to double vowels.
Yeah. Teddy's family. It was in those days. It was pronounced Roosevelt.
Yeah.
Teddy Roosevelt, but FDR's family pronounced it Roosevelt.
I didn't
that
realize
tended
that,
to
that
predominate.
FDR, Franklin, was in that much pain.
Oh God!
And well, the guy almost died.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he was really in bad shape.
The interesting thing is that when
What a physique he must have had. I mean,
most
to do that.
most of these guys, they have upper body strength because of the fact that their lower body doesn't really function.
Well, he had polio.
Yeah.
Poliomyelitis.
the first doctor that was brought in, a local doctor, misdiagnosed
Yes.
what was wrong and prescribed vigorous massage. And FDR, in the early days and weeks, underwent this excruciatingly painful massage and exercise of his limbs, which they now believe did more damage than the initial attack of infantile paralysis. There's some speculation that if not for all of that massage, he might have been able to walk again.
Well, that's interesting.
That this quack doctor actually did more damage than the initial attack of the disease.
Well, the other thing is the Sacred Cow. What was his name? Sacred Cow was his plane.
That was the plane, yeah.
It's over in Dayton, Ohio, at the Air Force Museum, and you can go through it. It's polished. It's kept inside it most of the time, and the problem comes in with it though is because everything's cordoned off so well to avoid people from touching things. It's very difficult to get through the plane.
And his
Well,
railroad
good,
car was
good.
called.
That's fine, because once people start touching and
Well, really,
fiddling
I'm not-
around,
I'm
they'll
not-
ruin it. And
I'm not arguing that point. I'm just saying though it's difficult for a lot of people to get through.
yeah, well,
But
He
you
had a
can
private
see-
railroad car. It was called
Yeah.
U.S. Railroad Number 1, just like Air Force One. It had the designation of and it was called the Ferdinand Magellan. This big armored railroad car that FDR used.
We just saw.
FDR sure had a lot of lady friends.
Well,
But there you can see on this plane though the elevator to bring them up. It was in the center of the plane. It's just like almost like a Bombay, and it was an elevator to bring them up because it was easier to do that than I guess to have
They said that,
some kind of
that
method on the outside.
he himself invented the rigging to get him up. Oh.
it was
That was
also
quite a good. I know it was
Very good.
it
Series.
was a repeat.
Yeah, it's been on. It's been on a few times.
Yeah, but
I've
that-
watched it several times.
That
Very
is, yeah.
that would go right along
What's
with
the name
the.
of the guy that did the movie?
good. Ken Burns.
Ken Burns.
Ken Burns.
That's one of his-
Anything he touches.
Oh,
Yeah, he's
you know,
great. Yeah.
he is.
It went along with the idea that fit in with the custom they had of the newsreels would try not to shoot him where he needed assistance to get up
Yeah.
or down
Yes,
or walk. You know?
yeah. Yeah.
People knew, but they just didn't want to show him that
In
way.
all the thousands of photographs that were taken of FDR, I think they found 2 that show him in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
When
And
they
those
were
were
at
tucked
Yalta
away.
or
They were
something?
never. There's one at Hyde Park. There's one where he's at like a big, like a 4th of July picnic at Hyde Park.
Or
and he's-
Casablanca, one of those conferences he was
And
in.
there's but I mean there are thousands and thousands of photos taken of him, and nothing with him in a wheelchair.
Speaking of people giving the voice, I didn't know Ed Herman had died. I know he
He
played
died
him
right
a
around
few times.
New Year's Eve, I think.
When Roosevelt was still around, president, commonly in several Warner Brothers pictures, Art Gilmore, the announcer for Red Skelton, among others, he provided the voice. He provides the voice in Yankee Doodle Dandy, but there's another guy is the body of
Well, that's just about the best definition of America that I've ever heard.
the one that shocked me.
Bye,
was,
Mr.
That's
Cohen.
what I like about you Irish Americans. All of a sudden,
You
like,
wear
suddenly,
your
I thought it was an
patriotism
American, right?
right there out on your sleeve.
But I was just throwing a little sidebar in there, and okay, we had our air and water show over the weekend, and was a tragedy there of this Army Sergeant expert jumper, Sergeant Corey Hood, first class. It was an accident. What did he collide with? What did he collide with?
With the Navy,
The leapfrogs, they
Like
call the Navy,
leapfrog,
Navy
yeah.
skydivers.
and I guess nobody ever, nobody took pictures of it.
There is
unless
there is
they
a,
did,
there
they're
is a
saving
video of it.
He died.
Yeah.
Yeah, he
And
yesterday.
he died
He was
yesterday
not
at 4 o'clock.
after the collision. The Navy guy landed, broke his leg, and the Army paratrooper was unconscious, so he couldn't control the chute. And supposedly, people that are knowledgeable about this say that their skydivers have colored chutes. When he crashed into the building, the chute was white. They have a safety device that when you hit a certain altitude, if your chute doesn't open or you don't open it,
altimeter.
it opens automatically. And so they believe that he was just completely unconscious. The auxiliary chute opened, and he just smashed into a building.
Yeah,
22nd floor,
Right.
and then fell.
They do have altimeters on their chutes
Right.
because of that reason. But
Excuse me, gentlemen. We must have a brief intermission now. You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians. Gee, that's frightening.
I had some friends that were sports shooters.
Hey, friends. Do you need an awning over your front, side, or rear door? Or your windows? How about a canopy for your carport? Or a patio cover over your patio so you can enjoy being outside in case of rain in the warm weather? All you have to do is call Awnings and More, and Raphael Bogus will drive over, measure up whatever you need, and go from there. You can call Awnings and More at 773-710-8403 or 847-890-1447. So if you need an awning for your windows or doors, call Raphael Bogus at Awnings and More at 773-710-8403 or 847-890-1447. Raphael also installs hand railings for your front, side, or back steps. You must be safe when you go up and down the steps, especially in bad weather. So for awnings or handrails, call Raphael Bogus at 773-710-8403 or 847-890-1447. Call today for a free estimate.
Now back to our special edition of Meet the Chicago Historians. Jack?
We're all here.
Every
special.
month we have a
Special. So it was special today on whatever.
If everybody
Like-
shows up, it's special.
It's like what was it a Kmart special. Anyway, getting back to Sergeant Hood, the Sun Times write-up has him. It says he was 5 tours in between Iraq and Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So here's a guy that proved himself, and it is ironic that something should happen like this.
Oh.
And,
It's a shame that he's going to get these medals and all of this
32 years old, by the way,
jubilation
gang.
after he's dead.
Yeah.
That's just
Well,
Posthumous.
you know.
One
And
other
these
point.
guys that jump out of airplanes are
They're-
all heroes.
When yeah,
They really
a perfectly
are.
good plane too.
They really are.
Well,
The,
there
Like
would have
I
been,
said before, telling the guys, I jumped once, and then they wanted to know, well, anybody want to, go the second time? Boo, and dead silence.
Yeah.
my cousin was in I don't know what outfit he was in, but he was involved with this jump, and he said every time they had a mass jump like that, they lose about 6 guys.
Whoa.
And
Just a training one?
yeah, training. Well, one guy I talked to years ago, he said that what happened to him was the guy above him got on the canopy and collapsed the canopy because as they were coming down, they didn't have control at that time.
No.
And the canopy consequently collapsed and they all went down. He survived, but still he had a lot of injuries.
I remember the night before we did our jump, we were all pretty
Drunk.
drunk. That's the name. Yes, right there. And we were asking if we could take a collection up and give it to the guy that did the chutes. Folded the chutes, and we had a good time, not knowing that the next day we were faced with this, and we were out of the unit if we didn't do it.
Yeah, understanding was the guys that pack the chutes have to jump at least once every so often because to make sure.
I'd still like to pay them off.
Yeah, I believe it.
There's a movie with Alan Ladd called Paratrooper about the RAF parachutists, and in that there are girls doing the packing the parachutes.
Well, what's interesting about the harnesses they have now, they used to have a different type of harness in the Second World War, and that was sort of one of those things you had to be real careful, otherwise you'd have problems with your gonads, I guess the way to put it. And the chute they have now was designed for women, and it consequently don't have as much trouble with it. And the women, because of the physiological differences, they designed a chute or harness for them.
You mean there's not what do they call it?
Equality?
Equality. Well,
now
there's another name for it too.
Yeah,
for men and women, if it's gender
unisex,
gender safe,
SEX?
unisex. Yeah.
Well,
I know. I tell you what, I don't know if I think I did urinate in my pants when I jumped out of that bloody plane, but on the way down it all dried, so I couldn't, I couldn't tell if I did or
not. As long
not.
as the other part didn't go. But the chutes that are out there now was really developed by the sports shootist, because after the Second World War, the sports shoot clubs started getting real popular, and they did cutouts on the canopy so they could steer it. And as they went along, they ended up with the type of chute they have now, and that evolved into the where they could do a lot of steering on. They got the.
I like it the way the former President Bush and these guys, when they jump out, when they got somebody there. If I could get Jane Mansfield to go, I would be glad to go again.
Yeah.
She didn't lose her head, really. That was not true.
No.
But that's nothing unusual. They do have the double jumps on there for people that don't.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, no, it's not
I don't
unusual.
know if Bush is going to do that this year or not.
I don't think he's.
He had a heart
Yeah,
problem.
I don't think you'll see him. I think he's done his last job.
One point that jumps out, at least to myself, about this whole story was, this is kind of an indictment of the newsboys in general. Yeah, at the beginning it says Sergeant First Class Corey Hood, and you go down, mention his experience. About the third or fourth paragraph says, Hood was prominent, pronounced dead at 4:05 p.m. at Northwestern Hospital. Would it have hurt them to say Sergeant Hood or Corey Hood? It has to be the last name. This struck me the first time. Does anyone, Tom, do you remember a name Dana Feitler? She was a medical student here in Chicago. This has got to be over 20 years ago. And the story went that the guy robs her, makes her go to a ATM where she withdraws money. He still killed her. She was from the East somewhere. And on the news report, they're calling her, and Feitler, couldn't they have said Miss Feitler? That's what struck me then. About any victim. It seemed like the victim has less dignity than the offender. They would dare you.
That was a story that went up years ago when they used to call the men by their last name, and women, they always had the female Mrs. or whatever it was. And somebody decided that was unequal. So now everybody's called by their last name.
You talk about an indictment of the news media. The news media shows more respect to a thug like Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri, than they do to a member of our United States military that is killed in the line of duty.
That's what I'm saying.
And that is a shame.
You know, they brought it up on the radio this morning, one of the announcers, that in the last year, there's been no problems, because Mike Brown is in the ground.
Yeah.
So they had a ceremony for that.
They wanted to get him. They wanted to get justice for him.
Oh,
I think he's
boy.
had his justice. He won't stick anybody else up.
Yeah, that's what they're saying.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
Right,
This
and-
is true
and-
with a lot of people, though. With you come out there with this woman that was hung herself, and they made a big deal out of it. The cop arresting her. Well, she was high on drugs, and he arrested her. His part of the job. Why are they crucifying him because he arrested somebody for wrongdoing?
What, in Texas, you mean?
Yeah.
What were you saying, Tom?
Well, the thing is, all I want is, when I make my decision about something, is to hear the truth and the facts. Getting back to the Ferguson,
Then you don't want our
incident-
news media.
Right,
You,
yeah.
you don't want to hear what our
But
news
here's
media
the thing
has to
about
say.
the incident in Ferguson. The original report, and I kind of fell for it. I'm thinking, well, maybe that isn't true, but as they reported it, there was not, other than the fact that Michael Brown and Officer Wilson were in the same place at the same time, other than that fact, there was not one single thing that the news media said in the original report that was correct. Not one single thing.
Yep.
He was coming from his grandmother's house. He was dreaming about
Going
oh Lord, you're looking forward to his first day of college. He wasn't even registered for college. He was walking down the middle of the street, and he was approached or stopped by Officer Wilson, and then he attempting to flee. He shot him in the back. I mean, there wasn't one single thing. So, if anybody should have got indicted in that situation, it should have been the news media.
The
You
other,
know,
the other
they're,
one
they're
was they did,
hanging Kane now.
Who's that?
Our Black Hawk
Oh, yeah.
champion, and nobody knows, what the complete story is.
No.
And now it's starting to come out, but boy, they sure want to convict him.
If they ever
Right
get the
away.
truth. Was it Clarence Thomas said after those extensive hearings and accusations by, what was her name? I can't think of it.
Anita Hill.
Yeah, Anita Hill.
Oh.
You heard the Anita Hill doll? You pull the string and 10 years later it talks? But anyway, he says, now where do I go to get my good name back after that? That's so true at everything.
Yes.
Get enough out there.
But what else said about the situation in that when the suicide in Texas, her family was all over the media saying this couldn't possibly have happened. She was
Yeah.
not that type of person. And then when you hear the facts of the case, she already attempted
Suicide a
suicide.
couple
And the
times.
intake in the hospital, she said she felt suicidal. I mean, just give me the facts and let me decide. Don't tell me what happened, And then the thing is, after it's all over with, there's no retraction.
Yeah.
they had that shyster lawyer that's on TV all the time going down there to help it out too.
I mean, it's a disgrace. I mean, when they altered that, the one news outlet altered the tape in the what was the original one?
The wannabe.
They originally called him White, and then when they found out he was Hispanic,
Yeah, what's the
they
guy's name? I can't
referred to him as white Hispanic.
Trayvon Martin.
Yeah, Trayvon Martin.
Yeah,
They actually altered the tape to leave out the fact of the dispatcher asked, "Can you describe him?" They left that out.
He just said he's
that
black.
that
They
didn't
just said
advance
he's
the
black.
storyline. That
Yeah.
didn't advance
Right.
their storyline.
Editing it.
Yeah.
It doesn't sell papers.
No.
The good stories don't sell papers.
Well,
A
what-
good
what-
friend of
Talk
ours,
about
and,
truthful
Tom
stories.
and Jack, Jimmy Maurer, who was retired as chief of patrol of the police department in Chicago, is now writing a quite extensive recollection. He calls it venting, and Jimmy is, it'll all be true. It's all true there.
There was an
And
episode.
after he gets it done, and gets somebody to proofread the elocution part of it, I will
No, Bill.
send it to all of you.
Bill.
It's quite.
There's no elocution in this state no more. It's just life
No.
without parole.
Well, the other thing that goes on years ago, I was at a fire, a rip-roaring fire in Humboldt Park area. And the next day I read about it in the newspaper, and I could have sworn it was in a different location.
Oh, sure.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
I've-
because I
I've been
watched
in-
the fire and nothing that they
I've been
reported.
involved in many situations, being 22 years in major accident investigation. So almost every single incident that I investigated was in the media. Some were lead stories for weeks, some were front page, but it was always reported somewhere. And like Al just said, I read the reports in the media about what took place, and I wonder if I was actually the investigator. It's nothing. They get absolutely nothing right. Nothing.
They
I
have
mean,
to juice it up to sell paper.
And I guess the point is if they can't get a simple two-car accident correct, what do they do with major stories? I mean, how messed up are they?
Well, the only newspapers I found out that have a bunch of truth to it are the neighborhood papers.
They're the best. They are the best at getting
Yeah.
the story right.
And the trouble is they're disappearing.
Yeah.
And it's a real sad situation. At one time in my neighborhood, they had 3 or 4 neighborhood papers, and out of that, only one's left.
At least you got one.
Well, I have to look for that one, actually. It's actually not per se in my neighborhood, but they'll stretch a little bit.
Right.
But they had the Pioneer Press, which semi-folded. They had the Leader paper, the Learner paper, and then they had, I think it was the Peacock paper, which you still see the building down on Milwaukee Avenue. It's been vacant for I don't know how many years. But
In 1962, in New York City, there were 7 daily newspapers, big, major daily newspapers, and now they're down, I think, to 3. I think there are 3 today.
I get advertisement all the time
Times
from New
and
York.
Daily
and look
News
at
and
the
the
price
Post.
of our papers now too.
Yeah.
It's unreal, and then all you're doing is getting ads.
But one thing,
Which they have to put in to
Oh, that's
to
how
sell.
yeah. But
one thing you got to remember, Bill. What's your dollar worth?
Yeah, yeah, you're
Because I
right.
tell the kids.
but
They tell the kids, my mother would send me to the corner store with not the cheapest price, right? With $1. I'd come back with a gallon of milk, a loaf of Silver Cup bread, not the cheapest bread, pack of Winston's for her and Dad with 11 cents change. Now, one candy bar you can't even buy for $1.
if you're
So,
lucky.
I still remember, I used to love this ad. I think it's from the late 60s, early 70s,
What?
McDonald's, where they would talk about how you could go to McDonald's and you could get a Big Mac, a small order of fries, and a Coke, and something you haven't seen in a long
Yeah,
time,
yeah.
change back for your $1.
Right.
You could get all of that for less than $1. It's
Well-
incredible to think of that today. A hamburger, fries, and a Coke, and change back for your $1.
And you're lucky now.
And that's not
if you
that
get the
long. We're
right
not talking
change.
about the turn of the century. We're talking about the 60s.
Yeah, the other one that's sort of interesting, the Chuckles. You remember that jingle?
Who?
Chuckles,
Remember the
5
candy.
Five Chuckles,
pieces,
5 flavors, 5 cents.
5
Yeah,
cents.
yeah.
Now it's $1 and a quarter.
you can't even find
presumably,
Chuckles around here.
And they're smaller. No, you
Yeah,
can't.
a nickel candy bar is what, $1 or $1
Buck and a quarter. Yeah. And they're smaller.
They're smaller than they
Yeah.
were when I remember as a kid. Yeah.
Well, they like to lie to people now and say, "Oh, you got this big box," and they forgot that half of it's empty. You know,
Which half?
bottom half.
Anyway, getting on to some other local, we have, see, our old friend from Channel 7, Andy Shaw, is now CEO of the, what do they call it now?
Oh,
Better
mix-
Government or
something
Better
like that.
Government Association.
Yeah, BGA, that's it. And anyway, he's talking about how to prevent another meter privatization fiasco. Well, I agree it was a fiasco. We hate to wax, so dearingly and nostalgically about things were better, but a lot of things were better the way they were done
Sure they
before.
were.
One was the parking meter system. Duncan Parking Meter Company was right in Chicago. If you had a problem with a meter, they had a number to call. Meter wasn't working. They call it. And now this happened. I don't know. Did it ever happen to anybody else? You? And they go out and they check it. Yeah, okay, it was wrong. Send it to us. They non-suit it. Now, this thing, I don't know. It's you got to go and
Well,
you got to
it's-
stamp it and how much it costs you. And then if you do have a problem, well, there's no meter anymore. But I mean, it makes you just wonder what was the deal here with this thing. And
Well, you
according
have
to
to
this,
have-
it was snuck
Daily-
in by Daily. So
Daly had to have reward his friends, So consequently, you got the meter contract.
And they needed money up front. It was a way of getting money up front by selling a contract that extends 1,000 years into the future. And
But the trouble was that it was sold. There was never any split on the revenues on that, which is one of the things they should have done.
he wanted the money up front.
Yeah,
There were no hearings. Nobody ever got to
In
object. or-
Chicago,
City council had to decide in 2
they
days.
dug up an airport in the middle of the night without telling
Yeah.
anybody. I
I
mean,
think that would
Well,
be a
that's the first-
felony, wouldn't it?
that was the first act of terrorism in Chicago.
I would that
Very
that's
good,
still
Al.
to this day that strikes me as incredible to do that. To just order the bulldozers to go in there, the hell with the law, the hell with this, just do it.
I
mean-
said it's the first act of terrorism in Chicago.
And they didn't give a damn about
And he got
the
away with it.
monies that airport raised for the city
Yeah.
and to keep that
Yeah.
place going.
It was
Well, the other thing on that airport was that Maggie didn't like it.
Yeah.
of course that explains it all.
Yeah. There's
And
also a
the,
big building that couldn't have gone in with that airport there. I
Well, the other
understand
thing, the other thing, it had the highest landing fees in the states.
Mhm.
So consequently, it wasn't used that often. Plus the fact that it had a lot of crosswind problems.
Oh, I disagree.
so-
I've been detailed out there, and it was very active.
Yeah, I'm just
very active, and nobody complained about the landing fees. They were all big corporations.
Yeah, they
write
didn't
it
care.
off.
But
We're not gonna use it, but-
I'm just saying though that. But the other thing was years ago, Butler Aviation offered to take it over as a Butler Aviation Airport,
General aviation.
and old man Daley said no way he's going to give that away as a, even though the city was not doing too good of a job of running it, but still.
We
As
lost
opposed to
fire,
everything
we
else
lost
that the city
police
does such a
protection.
good job of running.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
that. As a sidebar to what we were talking about with the Andy Shaw column and the parking meters, in recent years, one alumnus of our show, Vic Rini, was very active in getting both the concealed carry for the state and the concealed carry, retired officers concealed carry nationally. He was to Washington, he was to Springfield. That took forever. That finally got through. Very quietly, now I have like many people have, if you have, a disability with your walking or heart, you have the disabled driver's permit, hang tag or permit. All of a sudden, very quietly, under the radar, the notice comes from the Secretary of State's office that these permits are no longer valid as to relieve you of the obligation of the parking meter system. That comes in quietly, but the other thing took forever. What does this tell you here?
Well, what happened there was Daley again sold the meters, and he was guaranteeing so much money on it, that's whatever it was, and the handicap spots sort of got into the revenue stream as such. The problem, well, I'm not sure about anybody else, but I very seldom use my sticker to get free parking, mostly because I don't park where there's parking meters. I try to avoid the area. And a lot
Well,
of
you
other
do, but you
people
can't, Plus, if you're legit, you're legit. We know that it was cutting. How much of this was cutting into their revenue? The very, 1/10 of 1% of the drivers, or some small obligation like,
Well,
someone
take a
small.
look at some of the streets; they're empty because of the fact that the people will not pay the price for the parking meters.
I won't drive in the city. I avoid driving in the city unless I absolutely have to.
that's
Where I
right.
would have to park somewhere.
It ruined a couple.
It's outrageous what they did. The parking fees are just absolutely outrageous.
Well, I know myself. I would never go downtown. Mostly, I can't afford it.
I go downtown by train.
That's where the lights are bright.
I used to
Yeah.
drive downtown, but I would never do it again.
No, I'm
I'm not going to pay what they charge to
Everything's
park.
by
I
train.
have to drive in the city, and sometimes downtown, and I really, and this is an anonymous caller. I really don't give a damn about those placards and paying for them, and no, it's half of them are, they're people aren't paying any attention anymore. I'm surprised they haven't shot at some of those red light things.
Oh, yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing is go down the street, and every other street's got a stop sign, so nobody even bothers stopping anymore. I almost got hit by a couple cars. I stopped and I went ahead, and this guy just kept on going. You know, like the world. He owns the world, I guess, type of driver.
You're talking about side street
There are a
stop
number
Side
of-
signs?
streets where you just don't
There are a
go.
number of those on the road.
Well, the other one is, I remember years ago I was on the south side. I got the green light, and the person over there decided that they're going to make a turn. They had a median strip in there. She bounced over the strip and gave me the finger. You know, and
Look at these couple of kids, maybe they weren't kids, but adults that were killed here about a week ago by the guy that went. I think it was on. Was it on 80 or somewhere west of here? The guy went over the median and he's going the wrong way.
yeah.
This morning they had the Kennedy shut down.
Shooting.
They finally they were some guy was shooting at the cars.
Yeah, I was out by O'Hara Field, you know.
Now, Tom, you
Oh,
worked
it was
ex-
That was
Right.
Rosemont.
Tom worked the expressways some. Do
Yeah,
you
yeah,
got any stories
in
about
the city around Wilson Avenue? Sayre.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought there was one out by Rosemont too, because they said it went to,
Al, there could be. I
Because they
mean,
took
you know,
him-
this is not a rare thing anymore.
no, they took him to the Rosemont police station.
Well, I hope they taught him something.
No, they haven't caught anything, but they haven't caught the shooter.
Have they got a rubber hose there?
I don't know, but I haven't heard anything more. But that was this morning on the TV.
I like the story came about all these incidents on the highway, so the state police are cracking down. I don't know what that means. Do they a million state troopers out there now, or what?
They are as void of manpower
Sure.
as the city of
Sure.
Chicago is.
Yeah.
You know.
That's what I'm saying. But
the
even
thing
the
is
story
that-
reads,
You know, the average person, when you say, well, there aren't enough police out there to write tickets, yay, that's great. It's great until some drunk runs into you
Yeah.
and killed your wife and turned your kids into paraplegics.
I
Then
remember-
it's not so great anymore.
How many? What is the manpower of the Chicago Police Force? Do you know?
It's a lie, whatever they
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
It's supposedly listed at like 12,500, almost 13.
I don't know. It's a secret where most of them are. It must be the
but
secret
be-
police.
The best I can get is there's probably about 11,000. When you eliminate the people that are on medical disability and permanent disability and time due and whatever, it's
Caps.
The big
Yeah.
problem
Yeah.
is that the retirees are outnumbering the recruits coming in,
right.
and so they're losing more
And
manpower all the time.
That's a
And
good
the
thing.
administration thinks it's easier to pay the overtime to
Yeah,
guys.
than to
but-
hire.
It is.
But the thing is, in a situation like that, how many hours can you work and
Yeah.
still be, you know,
well,
the top of your
legitimately?
game, yeah.
Yeah, right, exactly.
You get-
And another thing about that is it was proven there were more beefs cops get into on the last day before their days off because everybody gets a little tired, stressed out, whatever. That's proven. So if you're going beyond that, what are you asking for?
trouble.
Yet God help you if your judgment isn't perfect. If you make
Yeah.
the slightest slip, you've got the media down
Right,
on
and-
top
Well,
of you.
yeah,
and-
you gotta be-
Plus, you know, the majority of studies that they've done is when someone, and this isn't unique to the Chicago Police Department, it's nationwide. I think Los Angeles actually did the study. They said you are going to get 7 productive years out of a police officer. Again, and this is anywhere. It's probably a little bit more or less in a big city, but anyway, that's the average. So in what LA does, or they did, I don't know if they still do it, if you are not in some specialized unit or make rank after like 10 years, they just want to force you off the job because they realize that you are going to kind of mope around and they're not going to get a lot of productivity
So if
out
you're
of
just
it.
a patrolman after 10 years, you haven't advanced.
Well, about 34 years.
Yeah, right, right. You're sitting in the squad car, you know,
Coasting.
drinking coffee and hoping you don't get called.
I like that.
Well, you've been listening to Meet the Chicago
Hold that thought.
Historians, and we thank you for that. We'll be right back.
Friends, are you looking for a place to have some printing done? Well, I have the right place for you to go, and that is the printing store in Oak Park, Illinois. Call or see Phil Berry at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or call 708-383-3638. Phil will sit down with you and help you plan whatever you need printed. Now, his products are brochures, booklets, business cards, catalogs, envelopes, letterheads, flyers, invitations, newsletters, notepads, menus, mailers, manuals, labels, posters, postcards, price lists, NCR forms, sale sheets, table tents, pocket folders, and presentation forms. And the services include 1 to 4 color offset printing, digital copying, high-speed copying, graphic designs, typesetting, laminating, foil stamping, die cutting, and imprinting. And he also has a complete bindery service, which includes booklets, cutting, scoring, folding, numbering, padding, and drilling. So once again, for all your printing needs, see or call Phil Berry at the printing store at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, Illinois, or call 708-383-3638. And once again, they are located at Madison Street and Clarence Avenue, just east of Oak Park Avenue. And it's at 621 Madison Street in Oak Park, or call 708-383-3638 and ask to speak to.
Now, back to our show.
Session.
I'd like to tell a World War II story before we move on. We're talking about the 70th anniversary. I came across this, and I was fascinated to learn this. We all know that the first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima. 3 days later, August the 9th, the second bomb is dropped on Nagasaki. Somewhere along the line, in reading about World War II, I read that Nagasaki was not the initial target for that plane.
That's correct.
That's right.
There was a city
Weather
named
issues.
Kokura that was the primary target, but Kokura was socked in by clouds and fog, and so the plane called Boxcar was assigned to Nagasaki. And I had always thought that meant that in flight it was notified that Kokura was socked in, and so it headed for Nagasaki. That's not what happened. They actually went to the city of Kokura, which no one has ever heard of. They made 3 bombing runs over Kokura, trying to find what was called their aiming target. There was a landmark that had been established as the target, which had to be visually sighted before they could release the bomb. And the target at Kokura was an arsenal that was along a riverbank, and they simply couldn't find it. They were going to make a 4th bombing run over Kokura, hoping the clouds would open up. But the Japanese were starting to throw up flak, and what few remaining fighter planes they had were in the air. There was some doubt that they could reach the B-29 because the B-29 flew so high. But they came to the conclusion that there was just no point in prolonging this, and so they headed for their secondary target. Nagasaki was also socked in by some cloud cover, and they were doubtful that they would be able to drop the bomb at Nagasaki, but they had strict orders. That bomb had to be released on that day. They were not to return to Tinian with the bomb still in the bomb bay, because it was very important that the Japanese believed that we had these bombs stacked up in the Marianas like cordwood. The first one goes on the 6th, the second one goes on the 9th. They wanted the Japanese to feel they're going to be unloading these on us every couple of days forever. So if they had not been able to target Nagasaki, it would have been up to the naval officer, a man named Commander Ashworth, was actually in operational control of the bomb. He was the man that had been given authority by General Groves, the head of the Manhattan Project, to be in charge of the release of that bomb. If they couldn't hit Nagasaki, it would have been up to him what city would have been the next target. And he later wrote that the only target he could think of was Tokyo. And if they
Tokyo?
had Tokyo, if they, which had of course been heavily bombed by incendiary raids, but if they had not been able to find their aiming target at Nagasaki, his thinking was he probably would have ordered a run on Tokyo, which would have destroyed the government, which would have destroyed the imperial palace, which almost certainly would have killed the emperor, and could have had who knows what ramifications for the ending of the war if Tokyo had been destroyed. But as it developed, there was an opening in the clouds. They saw their aiming target at Nagasaki, and they released the bomb. But I was fascinated. I never realized that they'd actually made 3 runs over the primary target. And
Sidebar. I have a
unable to hit
sidebar.
it. Sure.
Personal experience. They used to have these. Well, they have them now and again. They have like a movie fairs or different fairs. At the one, here's the guy sitting there with the book. Fred O'Leary was his name. He's passed away since then.
Yeah, I
he
got
was
the book by him
He was
signed.
the co-pilot for Boxcar.
Boxcar.
Chicago boy.
Third pilot.
Oh, he said co-pilot.
Yeah.
It was in the Army then. It wasn't the Air Force yet. So anyway, young guy. You saw the pictures of him. He was now up in his 80s, and he had the book, and he also had a video that I bought. And I went to his house a few times because I'm trying to think, what do I get presents for the older guys and my uncles or whatever? Oh, he was at like 113th West of Western. I was at his house a couple of times, and very interesting. He came back, and he had a job as superintendent of bridge tenders for a long time here. And someone said never had any of his own children. His wife had passed away by then, but they wondered if there was something to do with what do they call it? Not impotence, sterility,
yeah.
being sterile from the blast or something. Possible, I don't know.
All right.
Well, he was a really
here's
great guy.
a sidebar to your sidebar, and that is that Bach. I think it was Captain Bach, for whom Boxcar. It's not, of course, it's not Boxcar. B-O-X-C-A-R.
B-O-C-H.
Boxcar. He was not in command of his own plane that morning,
Right.
because a higher-ranking officer, Major Sweeney, had pulled rank on him and had taken over command of Boxcar. So Bach is in command of the second plane that has the instrumentation to record. They had all sorts of instrumentation to record the blast, and they actually dropped, and I did not realize this, they dropped devices with parachutes that recorded the blast wave and radiation and everything. Bach was in command of this second plane, which I think had this strange name, the Grand Artiste. The Grand Artiste was the name of the plane that he was piloting, not his own plane that had his name.
But the other thing was that if anybody's interested, there are replicas of the bombs at the Air Force Museum.
Little
Big
boy.
boy and Fat Man.
Little boy.
Little boy.
Little boy and Fat Man.
Who's Fat Man?
Fat Man was the bomb that was dropped on Nagasaki. It was the plutonium bomb. The bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima was the only uranium bomb ever built. We were, as a precaution, we had 2 parallel methods of developing the fissionable material, so that if one didn't work, we would have the fallback of the other position. Both did work, but the uranium system was very difficult. So they only built one uranium bomb. That was the one called Little Boy. It looks like a cylinder.
Yeah.
It looks like a long cylinder. And that was the bomb that was dropped on Hiroshima. Fat Man, which was looked more like a traditional bomb, but a very fat bomb, was the bomb dropped on Nagasaki.
Yeah, like I said,
This last, what is it, about a week ago, maybe more than that, that explosion in China certainly, looked like they dropped an atomic
There
bomb
was-
Yeah.
there.
There was even
And-
there
and
was
there's
kind
all-
of a mushroom
Yes,
cloud from it.
well, they had all of these chemicals in that, and they thought that there was a munitions dump also involved in that. But there's like 117 dead now, and how many more will die?
Yeah, and with China, you'll never know what
Yeah,
actually
exactly.
happened. Or how many-
John,
They have
Censor-
they have a photograph of a bunch of cars, new cars, I guess.
Cars were
all new
exploding
cars. That was
afterward.
There was
new
about
cars.
1,000 were
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
But John, since you are very knowledgeable about the situation, let me get your take, because it seems to be the popular position that those bombings ended the war. What do you think?
They certainly ended the war. Japan was prepared to fight to the death. They had lost their fleet, their merchant marine, and their air force. They had lost most of their overseas empire. Most of their island bases had been conquered or had been surrounded and strangled. But in their home islands, they had hundreds of thousands of soldiers. They had a large supply of small arms and ammunition. They were training civilians, women and children, to fight with sharpened sticks and with Molotov cocktails. Bear in mind that the Japanese fought to the last man for Iwo Jima, which is a volcanic cinder in the middle of the Pacific. It's absolutely worthless in any sense but as a military base, and they fought. I think there were like a half a dozen Japanese that actually surrendered on Iwo Jima. When they landed on Okinawa, there were civilians that were jumping off of cliffs, committing suicide rather than surrender to the Americans. If we had invaded Japan, they would have fought. And I always like to tell people, I'm wearing my dad's ring that my dad got in the Philippines. He was in the liberation of Manila. In August of 1945, my father, John Ellis Kacholko, private first class, was in the 6th Infantry Division. They had landed at the Lingayen Gulf. They had been part of the liberation of Manila. Their division had been pulled back out of further combat. They were being refitted, re-equipped, new men brought in from the States, and had we not dropped the atomic bomb, Operation Olympic would have taken place in November of 1945. That would have been the invasion of the island of Kyushu, which is where Nagasaki is located, on Kyushu. In March of 1946 would have come Operation Coronet, which was the invasion of the main island of Honshu. In that invasion, and they've only a few years ago they declassified the plans from the Pentagon. My dad's division, the 6th Infantry Division, which he was a member, would have landed between Mount Fuji and Yokohama on what is called the Tokyo Plain. Their objective was the city of Tokyo. Now imagine how the Japanese would have fought for their capital city, the Imperial Palace, and the Emperor himself, who presumably would have been somewhere on the island of Honshu. The casualties would have been just unimaginable. Far greater Japanese casualties, but the number of Americans who would have died were estimated at hundreds of. We might have lost as many men in the invasion of Japan as we had lost in the entire rest of World War II. It might have doubled. So no one will ever persuade me that there was a mistake made, because I always say I might well not be here talking to you if my dad had to go in that invasion in 1946.
In the balance of things, lives were saved on both sides.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
That's what I was telling you.
Because they estimated 1 million Japanese dead or more if we had. Because they would have literally fought street by street. We saw that, and we saw that in Europe. We saw Russians fighting in Stalingrad. We saw the Germans fighting for Berlin. The Japanese would have fought fanatically for
the last man.
And it took the second bomb. There was always the thought that if we only dropped one bomb, the Japanese would have thought, well, that's all they have. They had some wonder device, but that's it.
Well, they did
we
give
survived that, and they won't be able to do it again. So the second bomb was to impress them that we have more of these.
The big question, and I wish they would have, covered this on that WTTW program. The big question is, would FDR have done the same thing?
Oh, I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any question. He's the one that authorized the building of the bomb.
Yeah.
I can't see FDR making any decision different from what Harry Truman did.
Well, the other thing that's sort of interesting.
And we built it to use against Germany. People always say we wouldn't have used it in Europe. It was built to use against Germany. No one was thinking of Japan when Einstein wrote his letter to FDR. It was built to use against the Nazis.
What's this big city that was incinerated so badly in Germany?
Dresden.
Dresden, yeah. Wasn't that
was
just
terrible?
as bad?
Tommy did the
More
bombing.
casualty, I think more people died in Dresden than in either of the atomic
No
bombs.
radioactivity, but
There was actually a retribution raid done on Dresden, from what I read. I call him Terrible Tommy. He led the English raid there because of the fact that all the damage that the Germans did. And Dresden was a picturesque town.
Capital of Saxony.
Yeah, it was quite a town. But the other thing was sort of interesting about the Japanese War. Russia didn't really get involved with it until the end, and then they claimed.
Well, it was over when we had already dropped the first bomb when Russia declaring war had as much significance as if Liechtenstein had declared war at that point. I mean, it was the atomic bombs that brought, and it took the emperor. The emperor had to personally order them to surrender. There were still officers after the second bomb who didn't. They said, we're still going to fight.
Right. There was a lot of generals that didn't really care what the emperor said they wanted to
There
fight
was a
anyway.
coup. There was an attempted coup. They were going to try to take over the palace and
But Russia took over 3 islands, I guess,
never gave them back.
and Japan's trying to get them back now. And the xenophobic mentality he had years ago, the people on those 3 islands, even though they're Japanese, they would not be considered Japanese.
But John,
They'd be considered foreigners.
like you said about the people diving off cliffs, the mindset of the Japanese, a story that interesting and very sad, is the kamikaze pilots. You couldn't be married or have children, and there's a story of the wife of one of the kamikaze pilots who she knew wanted to do this so badly. They had 3 children. She drowned her 3 children and committed suicide so he could fly as a kamikaze. I mean, that's the mindset of people in Japan.
You have to understand, very few Japanese, very few ordinary Japanese had any personal experience with Americans or knowledge of Americans. They were told by the government that the Americans were barbarians,
Savages.
that we were going to behave, and I always say, what I think of it, they told them that we were going to behave the way the Germans had behaved in Eastern Europe or the way the Russians had behaved when they got to Berlin, that we were going to loot and rape and pillage and
Or where the Japanese were in China.
and of course, which of course they didn't tell them,
China.
or they didn't, of course they didn't tell them that.
Yeah, ask the Koreans about the Japanese.
But of course, and the Japanese, the people naturally believed this is what they were told by their government, that the Americans, that dying was better than living. Of course, when it turned out, naturally, none of that happened. There was a great story on one of these documentaries about the war, about the American POW in a prison camp not far from Nagasaki, and they saw the blast. They didn't know what it was, but they assumed it was some new weapon America had because they could see this cloud over the city. And he said the next day he came out of his hut, and the rule in POW camps was that all Americans, regardless of rank, you could be a colonel, you had to bow to any Japanese soldier. And he thought he would test it. And he walked up to this Japanese sergeant, and he didn't bow. And the Japanese sergeant looked at him for a long second, and then the Japanese sergeant bowed to him. He knew that was it. The war is the war we've won. The war, that whatever that was, the war is over.
I remember this when Edward Doliak and his partner was Ty Wansley had the talk shows on. First it was on, I think, WJJD, and then it went over to, or no, BLS, WJJD, what it was. Well, I remember I called in one time, they were talking about, at the end, with the Emperor and some of the high command, they weren't going to go along with this. They would, they were going to do the ultimate, and I said, what they did was, if they, in their culture, if they're disgraced badly enough, they would have to take their own life. And I said, they went out and they committed Jack Brickhouse. Then I had a little pause. Oh, I'm sorry, I meant Harry Carey, of course.
Oh, boy.
But I had to get that one in,
But
Tom.
the stories are legendary about Japanese soldiers being found in caves years and
Oh,
years
yeah.
after.
Guam in the 70s, they were finding them on Guam and in the Marianas.
1973, I remember those.
Never surrendered.
They would have to play remember once in the 70s, they had to play and of course Emperor Hirohito was still alive. They had to play a recording of Emperor Hirohito personally telling him, the war is over, I command you to surrender.
That last business reminds me of the Laurel and Hardy movie, Blockheads,
Oh, yeah,
where
and he's-
they're in the First World War, and they're all going over the trench, but Stan's got to watch. They said, you wait till we get back. So 20 years later, he's still in the trench. There's a big pile of bean cans over there, and there's like a big furrow where he's been marching back and forth. But I mean, hey, you know what? Truth is stranger than fiction, ain't they?
You got to remember, Japan, in over 2,000 years, Japan had never been conquered. So they had, we think of America has never been conquered. They had 2,000 years of history. It was unimaginable to them that they could lose. They couldn't conceive of the fact that their divine emperor, who was a god, could be defeated.
We had him at some kind of a detail. I was in the 70s. I was in loop traffic, and Howard Hartung, the one sergeant who'd been so long in major accidents, also was there. He says, 30 years ago, I'm in the Marine Corps fighting these guys, and I'm in a detail to protect the Emperor. So,
Well, there's the old joke about the guy, the naval officer who was court-martialed because he sank 80,000 tons of Japanese shipping. He says he was court-martialed. He should have been on. He's, yeah, but this was in 1958.
The story I was over in Poland was sort of interesting. They said the damage that the Nazis did was superseded by the damage that the Russians did when they invaded Poland.
Well,
they said it was horrendous.
People in Poland,
The Russians were worse than the Nazis.
the people in Poland say that World War II was the war they lost twice.
Oh, yeah, sure.
You know, no doubt
to
about
the
it.
Germans and to the Russians. Russians.
One
they
out of
behaved
four.
like- the Russians behaved like barbarians in all the countries that Hungary and Poland. And they looted everything. I remember they went into the Hungarian state bank and busted open all of the safety deposit boxes. These were owned by individual people. Everything, coins, money, anything. They just looted anything they could lay their hands on.
A friend of mine was from Poland. He said his mother got his mother got married. The German soldiers came over to the wedding and gave him presents.
Well, I
So
know
it wasn't always what you read.
A school
Some
teacher.
of the regular army behaved.
Yeah. Well, they were draftees.
Yeah.
There was a guy
Yeah.
that owned a liquor store and tavern on 66th and Kedzie. I know you're shocked to learn that I would actually know a liquor store and bar owner, but
You know them all over, don't you?
right. He was a school teacher in Lithuania, and I asked him that same question once about Russian Nazis. He said, without a doubt, the Germans. He'd take the Nazis over Russians.
Yeah.
There's absolutely no question about it. And he lived under,
I heard a story from a woman saying that they were giving the babies to put them on the German tank. The young kids say, "Please take them before they get here."
Yeah.
The guys
There
from
was,
the east.
there was a German general named Blaskowitz who was involved in the invasion of Poland. And he began to see the beginnings of what the SS was doing, the atrocities, he thought this can't be authorized by the Fuhrer. They're out. So he reports back to Berlin about these out of control SS units, thinking, he still was of the mind that Hitler
it's
was
war,
a reasonable man, and that, of course, he winds up being sidelined and eventually cashiered because he was interfering with the with the operation.
They killed him?
Because of course, no, he wasn't executed, but he didn't rise any further in the military, and he didn't get any further commands. And Hitler chews him out. Hitler actually personally berates him for having having questioned the orders that I have given and the policies that we
Well,
have.
you could see some of it on Hogan's Heroes, where you could see the black shirts coming in there and everything else. And Colonel Klink is bowing to him because he's scared to death of him.
Sure.
And a lot of the camp soldiers and guards were rejects. Basically, they got there because they weren't good for anything else. Basically, amounts.
Well, I think that
So
the fact
consequently, he had that
talking
problem.
about Hogan's Heroes, that historically correct that the Luftwaffe ran the prison camps.
Yeah, they were called Luftstalag.
Well, Luftstalag, right.
Yeah, they were treated better.
Of flyers. Now, I imagine that when they captured ground troops,
They were
that
different.
might have been managed by the army. But flyers, like Hogan's guys, they're all flyers. Those
okay.
were controlled by
Well,
the
I see.
Luftwaffe.
Goering
Goering was an empire builder. I mean, he got control. In Germany, for example, paratroopers were members of the Air Force. They were not soldiers. They were part of the Luftwaffe because they jumped from planes, so they were part of the Luftwaffe.
Well, also Goering, he also looked at the flyers as being a little more above the average soldier, so consequently they were treated better than prisoner of war camps. And Goering himself was, like I said, an empire builder. The Navy had a carrier, and they couldn't couldn't get planes for the
Squabbling
carrier
with the Air
because
Force over who was going to control the planes.
right.
Goering wanted control of the planes.
Yeah, so consequently the carrier never
Never sailed. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was called the Graf Zeppelin.
Yeah.
The name of the one German aircraft carrier that was built was called the Graf Zeppelin.
They do
Which
have
sounds odd because you think of the Graf Zeppelin as a Zeppelin.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The Russians did capture and they ended up sinking it after a while. Otherwise, but there is a model of the carrier out available. I do have a copy of it.
It was considered a very poor vessel. It
was.
They copied. They got copies of British carriers and plans, and
Well,
they tried to, but they had no real facility. They never
Yeah.
built a carrier, and they really didn't know what they were doing
Yeah,
with it.
the Second World War was not really a naval war per se.
Not in Europe, no.
No.
In the Pacific it was.
It wasn't for the U-boats, huh?
That's why Hitler eventually. All he wanted were the U-boats. After the Bismarck was sunk, he felt that surface
there
ships didn't serve any purpose.
They had around 300 U-boats, didn't they?
By
many
the
were-
end of the war, they wind up sinking through. But at the beginning of the war, I think they had less than 50.
Yeah.
But,
I was surprised that they had that.
I think it was
many.
about 60% casualty rate on the,
Oh yeah.
or higher than that. That was high.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, we got the U-505 here,
Yeah, I just said
the first ship
that's
captured
interesting.
by the U.S. Navy on the high seas since the War of
War
1812.
of 1812.
It's quite a magnificent exhibit there as such. You have to go to see it. You know, they show
I haven't
a
seen it since they've
Oh, that's
changed
it.
it. I saw it years ago. I haven't.
yeah, but it's quite nice.
Well, we were on the Silver Side years ago with our Explorer post.
Right.
Yeah,
We just think we had a German U-boat and an American submarine a few miles apart, and the city decides they want to charge them a mooring fee. Remember that?
Yeah.
So what do they do? Got a tugboat and they towed it over to Muskegon, Michigan.
Where is it? Is it still there? Is it still?
Yeah,
in
it's still in
Muskegon.
Is it
Muskegon.
Muskegon?
Yeah, Muskegon,
And it's
Michigan.
open to the public. You can
Yeah.
see it.
That's
I
quite
guess,
a big
yeah.
exhibit there, from what I understand. I haven't been there, but the other thing too is there is a World War I submarine in the bottom of Lake Michigan, and they tried to raise it, but because of the antiquities laws, they can't do it. Don't ask. I don't. You know, this is stupidity on
Antiquities, huh?
itself, but they had to sink it because of the Treaty of Versailles, and they did, and it's still out there.
We never signed it, did it? Or it was never ratified. That's it. We never got
Well,
ratified.
It was a worthless treaty anyway. Treaty is considered the beginning of World War II.
There was something like 415 ordinances of it, and 400 of them were against Germany.
Yeah.
And folks, remember this. This was not Nazi Germany. This was no different than any other country at the time. Germany and Austria-Hungary, they were just another country.
Well, that's
just
the
on the
reason
other
why
side.
Nazi Germany came to existence, because of the Treaty of Versailles.
Germany was not the sole cause of the First
No,
World War.
no.
Hitler.
The
starts
Huns were
World
not,
War
they weren't
II.
even Huns, but,
I mean, there are a lot of hands in the pie in terms of starting the First World War.
Yeah,
there was a
Germany
big push on in the United States with German people, descended Germans and Irish, to go in on the side of Germany. The Irish because of Britain, and the Germans because of the old, their whole country.
the Irish didn't care for but the fact of the matter was that, as far as the United States is concerned, it would have made a damn bit of difference who won, whether it was England or Germany.
Well,
Clear the bridge.
I will. That's
Dive.
a little too far. Hey,
I think I got some of that
He's sinking
spray
a
on my arm.
submarine.
that was
Will
very
be.
good.
That kid in our class, Don Schulger, sounds just like one.
We'll be right back after these messages of interest and importance. That was a strange signal.
Rich looks at me like, what the hell's going on? Lost it now.
Well, friends, you need a carpet for your home? Stop in at Exhibitors Carpet Service at 4300 West Montrose Avenue in Chicago, just west of the Kennedy Expressway on the north side of the street. Their phone number is area code 773-283-0100 for a great deal on all your carpeting. If you need a carpet for your living room, dining room, bedroom, den, family room, or even outdoor patio, stop in at Exhibitors Carpet, located at 4300 Montrose Avenue, or call 773-283-0100. So remember, friends, if you need a carpet in your living room, dining room, den, family room, or even your outdoor patio, the place to go is Exhibitors Carpet, 4300 West Montrose Avenue, or call 773-283-0100. That's Exhibitors Carpet Warehouse, located at 4300 Montrose Avenue, just east of the Kennedy Expressway on the north side of the street on Montrose. Again, their phone number is area code 773-283-0100 for a great deal on all your carpeting.
Back to our discussion.
Okay, gang. Attention. We have to move on to our announced topic of shopping and banking in the old days, before the days of malls, before the days of branch banking, before the days of these big corporations that took over all these banks. Who wants to start?
Okay, banking in general, it closed at noon on Saturday. It closed about, 3 or 5 o'clock on weekdays?
3 o'clock. I mean,
3 o'clock.
Banks, and they were closed on Wednesdays.
It closed on Wednesdays. So it wasn't easy to bank at that time. you know.
The bankers would go golfing with the doctors probably in those days.
It was a real pain, especially if you worked days to get to the bank. You had to be there
And
Saturday,
you had
that was it.
you had independent names like out our way. Marquette Bank is one of the few left at independents like that. But there were others. Was that old bank building that was?
Well, my first bank was Public Savings and Finance. It was right across from the Woolworths where my mother worked at 63rd Ashland. And I was thinking about it the other day, just the mere mechanics of going into a bank in the old days. First of all, you had to have your passbook. So you went in with your passbook, and it was written, hand printed, your balance, and it was brought forward down the pages and deposits, and once it was like a little mini ledger. And when you went in to make a withdrawal, they went over and they got your card out of the file, and they brought it up and they hand wrote, they calculated what if you were making a withdrawal, and then deducted it from your passbook. And I mean, what a process.
It's before
that
before
was.
computers.
I remember when we got our mortgage. We went to Northwest Federal Savings and Loan, and we ended up, because we couldn't get a checking account there, we had to go over to Unity Bank.
They couldn't give checking, right? Because they were
They were
Savings and loans could not issue
Strictly
checking.
mortgage.
So we went over to
That's right.
Unity Bank, and then we opened an account later on at Columbia Bank, and we went to Fort Dearborn Bank, and all these are now called Bank of America. All these ended up. Northwest Federal became the Cell, took over by the Cell Bank or something like that.
And the only type of account you could get was a passbook.
Right.
There were no CDs. There were
Well,
no
and
time deposits.
there
None
was
of
a-
that. That didn't exist.
The Tallman Federal Savings at 55th and Kedzie, Ben Bohack, who was the founder of that bank, he prided himself on the fact that he got a lot of foreign-born, Polish, Slavic people to actually deposit their money in a bank, because before, they kept it under their mattress. They didn't trust anyone. And John Neary, a retired Chicago police officer, I think he was still on the job at the time, he worked security there. And when they went from the passbook system to the statement account system, there were many riots and insurrections when the foreign-born people, when they would
weren't gonna
take,
have that little
they
book.
took their passbook and told them that they would get, they went absolutely crazy. And John would go over to try to intervene. They take it passbook. They take it money. And then they would get the support of a lot of other foreign-born people, and they take it passbook. I mean, there were like mini riots.
These
Tom,
people probably
no.
remembered what had happened in Europe, where they had, where
Yeah.
governments
Yeah,
just
Europe.
confiscated
Exactly.
your money.
Tom,
and,
the same thing.
Exactly.
There was a bank at the intersection of Armitage and Western, and I was the captain of the company at Western Division. So to make it simple for me, I opened up an account there, and would stop over there on payday and deposit and so forth. And there was a copper that was doing security there, and one day I had to wait, and I was standing with this copper, I forget his name, and all of these, whether they were legal or illegal, were coming in to check out, like you say, their passbooks, and all it was done by pen or maybe pencil,
Right.
and done, and I looked at it, and I could see what was going on, and they were going out, and I talked to him, and I asked him about it, and he says, Bill, he says, you never have seen anything like a Saturday coming in here. He says, I have to call for help. He says, they're ready
And
to
a-
tear
and
the
an
place
interest-
apart.
an
And I says,
interesting-
well, I would too,
Yeah.
because you're putting your money in there, and what's he giving you? A piece of paper. Piece of paper that, yeah, I got yours, okay, boom, here.
On interest day, the same people would go into Tallman and they'd line up because they had to have the interest put on entered in their passbook, because if it wasn't entered on that day,
It wasn't official.
or they'd lose it.
I'll tell you even a better story than that. We had a fellow that was in our Kiwanis Club in Cicero who had been with one of the big financial institutions on Cermak Road for many years, and he said he had one customer who not only would come in and want that interest posted, he would come in and withdraw the interest in cash. They would give him the quarterly interest in cash. He would count it, and then he would deposit it back into the account.
Oh, that's
He wanted to
interesting.
make sure that that cash was actually there in the bank, that made it official that it was on his book.
Good.
There was a bank on Milwaukee and Belmont. Usually the banks open 9 o'clock in the morning, something like that. Nowadays, that one would open at 7 in the morning because all the Polish in the area wanted the early morning bank. And I looked at it, I said, at 7 o'clock in the morning, I was going to work, and here's all these people lined up at the bank. So I guess they had to change their hours there to accommodate the customers.
No, we gotta come with a little bit of a footnote here that the immigrants we're talking about, which of all of our ancestors, one way or another, maybe not that many generations ago, my grandparents from Austria were immigrants. They were legal immigrants who came here, not
Yeah.
sneaking in or
you're right.
No,
You
we're
had to
okay.
have a sponsor, too.
Right. No word from our sponsor.
What we have to. I don't think there's been a radio or television talk show in the last month that has not mentioned. So I think it's appropriate that we mention it here. The Donald Trump phenomenon. You brought it up when you said legal and illegal. I think
Yeah.
Trump really brought that discussion to the head about illegal
Well,
illegal immigrants.
as
Well,
usual, the
it's all-
prostitute
Sure did.
press.
They all had to be politically correct names.
You know,
No, not-
but it's another classic example of the news media says one thing, and the population is going the exact opposite direction.
Yeah.
They're just baffled by Trump's popularity and his rise in the polls. They can't figure it
What
out.
I thought was hilarious is the media actually thought that when he talked back to a network anchor, that was going to sink him.
Right.
Oh, people wouldn't stand for him talking back to a journalist.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't
Who
they
the-
understand?
who the
Most
HE double
Republicans
hockey
are
sticks
not
are they?
don't have a very high opinion of network journalists. The
Right.
fact that he talked back to that Kelly, Kelly
Megyn,
Megan
yeah,
Kelly,
Megyn Kelly.
that didn't do any harm
Well,
to him.
that should be only a one-time example, but it should be done more
Oh
frequently.
yeah,
Because the fact is that most of the talking heads you got on TV have no idea what they're talking about.
Ten
And it-
for
when he
prompter,
criticized
that's
McCain, they thought again most Republicans have written off John McCain years ago, and the fact that he criticized McCain didn't do him
Yeah.
the least bit of harm.
Yeah,
Well, the
that
thing
that
is-
was surprised me because the fact that McCain, he was beaten up. I've seen him in person, and his face looks like a road map.
Yeah, but we understand
His
that.
war
That has nothing to do with your
service,
politics.
nobody
Right, no one
fails
could
to honor his
question
war
Tammy
service.
Duckworth lost a leg in service, but I don't know. Politics aren't for me.
Yeah.
Important, God bless
That's all
her.
they do.
George
Well,
McGovern
you
was a
know.
war hero in World War II. He flew about 24 combat missions over
McGovern,
Germany,
right.
and I honor that. But I didn't vote for him when he ran for president.
Right.
Well, the other one's Tom Skilling was a fighter pilot.
Is he running for something?
No, he's a news
Skilling,
weatherman.
the
Aren't you
weatherman.
talking
Fighter
about
pilot?
Jerry
That's
Taft?
interesting.
I didn't know he was. He was
Yeah,
a
Jerry
No.
Taft was Air Force.
You sure
I know
about this,
that.
Al?
Taft. I knew was Air Force. Yeah,
Yeah.
I didn't know
He flew
Skilling.
several missions. He's up there already. He's ready to retire, but he doesn't.
Huh.
Just so he doesn't take after his brother.
Gosh.
Well, no matter
No, I
what,
should say Skilling. What the heck's his name? Jerry Taft.
Jerry Taft.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
he's.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
I didn't.
Yeah,
know
Jerry
this.
Taft.
Yeah,
was-
that's
Jerry
right.
Taft's an Air Force man. Yeah.
I got those two guys mixed up myself. But anyway, you got to remember too that we got to think that with the way the news media is, at 90% of it or whatever, you may as well have a state-run news media here because they only give you the certain story. Trump said one thing and they narrowed it down to something else.
Yeah.
When do you say it was wrong? Who is coming across? There's
Well, you know,
144,000
what I-
came across the southern border last
What
year.
I find
who are they?
interesting is that most state-run news media in other countries, they tout the merits of the country.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Our state-run media badmouths
Tears
the
it
country.
down.
Of course.
Badmouths military, badmouths police.
The University of Michigan has a school or a classroom to teach you how to deal with the media. If you're in and Frank Mascari, myself, Bill Reddy, we went to that before 1980, before we called for the strike, because that's all we had was media, and you would be surprised at some of the things they bring up. They themselves are very embarrassed by what the people out on the street are doing.
The other
And
one.
you know what? That helped us even to today. You know, we had that blue mass out at the heck was the name of it? Resurrection.
Mhm.
And we dedicated that statue of St. Michael, and I was standing there. I know it made it the front page of the Sun-Times, I think. I could see Phil Klein pointing to me, and the girl had pencil and paper, and she came over to me, and naturally she's a reporter for the Sun-Times, and I'm sorry, for the Tribune, and she wanted to know about my story, about what was going on, and what I thought of the judiciary at this time, and blah blah blah. Not a damn thing in the Tribune. But
No.
the girl, after she got done, the girl from the Sun-Times came over,
Yeah.
and she was even a younger girl, and I told her about it, and boy oh boy, everything was
Yeah.
in the paper that I told her that I was very disgusted with the judiciary and with the laws that are not being changed in the state of Illinois, and she put it all in. So there's the difference. The one went right over her head.
Well, it depends on the editor, doesn't it? Who decides what
Well,
person?
it could be.
You know?
Could be, yes. Yes.
Well, let's put it this way: the only people I have any chance of believing are the weatherman on TV.
Yeah, but they still give you
Believe
the
them?
odds. They
Well,
give you
they
the
get
odds.
close. You know,
They're
they
getting better and
admit-
better.
They give you the
admit-
day a week from now what the weather's going to be.
How can
Well,
they tell it global
they
warming?
admit
They
they're
can't.
guessing at it because this is all computer-generated material, and
I think P.J. Hoff was better than all of them, with the vice president in charge of
What's-
looking out the window.
What's the outlook, PJ?
That's
Better
right.
cartoons.
You know how that
Better
started,
cartoons.
don't you? You know how that started, don't you?
Oh,
That was a guy on the
No.
radio or TV, whatever it was. He said, a beautiful day outside, and somebody called him up. He says, pouring like hell out there. You better look out the window. So consequently, that's how that
Vice
started.
president in charge. You remember another character was Mr. Yellencuss.
Yeah.
right.
He had a character called Mr. Yellencuss.
Yeah, he was a
Yeah.
P.J. Hoff was a funny news
Yeah.
report.
But we digress.
Very
Right.
low key.
Back to shopping
Did we
and
do it
banks.
again?
Right, back,
Yeah, well,
back
we
to
did it
shopping
again.
and banks. We had our Donald Trump segment.
Moment.
Yeah. Well, it was unscheduled, but it was a good one. nonetheless. We'll
we
have to
gotta see
continue
what
that one
happens.
next time.
We got to see what happens in Iowa, because Iowa, for some stupid reason, carries the vote.
You are
And it's
in
not even an
Iowa.
election; it's a caucus.
Anyway, getting back to banks, old shopping centers.
I-
Any more? If you had a favorite old bank, Rich, you can think of when you would, like
Well,
this was the
Used to be Land of Lincoln on Irving and Austin.
Irving,
Nice local
Irving
bank.
I
Parking
think
Lot.
that I think it's just
West Irving
Lincoln now.
Bank
Isn't
at
that
one
the same
time,
bank?
Yeah,
Just
West
short-lived
Irving.
to Lincoln.
And now you got the Harris Bank there.
That's a chain. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah.
I get a kick out of this one, the Fifth Third Bank.
what does that mean?
I
have no idea.
heard about it,
Yeah, I've seen.
and there was,
Brand.
they were like
It's a
the
merger.
third bank, and I don't
It's
know
a
where they got
merger
that.
between a fifth bank of such and such
No,
and a
no,
third
no,
bank
no,
of such.
John, it wasn't. It was something about the wherever it came about. It was called the Third Bank of somewhere,
That's what I was saying.
somewhere, and now
That's what I was saying.
they had everybody else shut down, and now the Fifth Third Bank came in.
Well, I hope
and
they-
so they called it from now on.
I hope
Fifth
they
Third
don't
Bank.
merge with the First National Bank, because then it'll be the First Fifth Third Bank.
I tell you what, I banked when I came back from overseas. I banked at the bank in Rolling Meadows, and that was the I knew the Meadows Palatine, wherever it was, and then they were taken over by Harris, and so it was the Harris Bank.
Whatever became
Now
of
Harris-
Hubert, the Harris Lion.
He's
Yes.
still around.
Do they still
He's
use the
still
Hubert?
around.
I-
Yeah.
I get-
not quite so much, because when I walk into the one,
I'm
they used to
Hubert,
have
the
a couple
Harris
of them
Lion.
there.
Yeah, I got
People
about
bought 'em.
3 or 4 Harris Line.
But now
puppets
it's
at home.
BMO Harris.
Yeah,
Yeah.
BMO.
And they would sooner not
Bank of
say
Montreal, I
Harris.
believe.
That's, I think,
The
what
Bank of
it's
Montreal.
a
Yeah, but that
Canadian
is-
origin,
Harris
yeah.
was bought out by
BMO.
by the bank BMO,
What happened to Hubert?
and when we had all of
Now,
our problems here,
Monsieur
the
Hubert.
Harris BMO Harris was the only one you could trust,
Hmm.
because they go under Canadian rules.
He's Hubert.
And so they didn't have to comply with the.
So they're a trust company too, then.
Yes.
Whatever
Yeah. And I
happened
tell
to
you what,
Banco Popular?
my-
They were big for a while.
my,
They
brother-in-law-
merged with
Somebody-
Puerto Rican bank, and
My
They
brother-in-law,
must have
who
heard from
had
somebody.
tons of
Yeah.
money,
No, they just got
a
they died, that's
multimillionaire,
all.
Well, that's
still
bad.
banked there.
Ordering the
That's
food.
bad.
The facilities were bought out, and now there's somebody else in there. But at one time it was Popular, Banco Popular, and then it was Popular Bank, and now it's just gone altogether.
Unpopular.
Please, guys, one at a time. One at a time.
Yeah.
But the
As I was saying, the BMO is still the bank I can trust on anyway, because I got the brother-in-law's money in there, and he trusted them.
You think of some of these big banks downtown, like Northern Trust. That's there still, right? What about, remember Continental?
Continental. Yeah.
For
yeah,
years,
yeah.
Continental
Yeah.
Bank was a
You're on
the
LaSalle
big
Street.
bank with a little bank inside. They had the kangaroo.
Right.
That's long gone.
Their
It's the
lobby,
big bank.
Continental Bank's lobby was one of the classic old. When you picture in the old days what a bank
Yeah.
looked like,
Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
marble and the
Big.
brass teller cages and the
Yeah.
huge ceiling.
Mhm.
You know,
Like
that
walking
was-
That was a
into an
beautiful
old
place.
time
Yeah, it was a beautiful
theater.
place.
Right. Yeah.
I was going to say, it's
North-
interesting that they pattern themselves on, it's kind of like temples, places
Yeah.
of worship
Well,
in a way.
that's actually, there actually was part of the thinking in Europe that banks were supposed to convey that sense of grandeur and stability. There was
Awe.
even
Royalty.
there's even a form of architecture was pointed out to me once that the banks down in the Loop, where they start out with these very rough, big stones, and then the stones become smaller and more finished. And this was the way banks in Italy and in Florence and in Venice, when banking was first being established. That was sort of the way the image of banks. They wanted to convey this idea that they had been there forever and they would be there forever. So they had to have these Greek columns and pillars and everything to be very.
Well,
Ha ha
Very
ha! They
impressive.
sure fooled them.
yeah, if you go over to West Irving Bank building, you can't get in there, but they had the quite a nice looking interior to it. They had a big vault on the end of it that was about
Oh, yeah.
2 foot thick or whatever it was.
Pretty grand neighborhood bank. Yeah.
Yeah, they were.
yeah.
It was before. And I tried to file what happened to him, but it's apparently he's just died somewhere in the 30s or something like that. Because it reopened as Irving Bank, and then it moved from there over to Memora and Irving Park, and now it's closed. And Banco Popular took it over, I think it was, and never going anywhere.
When I got started
Yeah.
in Cicero Public Affairs in the 70s, Cicero's about the size of a Chicago ward, roughly. And there were in Cicero three separate banks, and I believe 14 separate savings and loan institutions. Of course, this is before branches. This is 14 individually operated savings and loans in a town the size of Cicero. They said it was maybe the greatest concentration of
Money.
financial institutions other than Wall Street or LaSalle Street.
I got a car loan over at Metropolitan Bank on Cermak Road, and they were complaining over there that all the Bohemians in the area would carry money around in their shopping bags, so consequently it wasn't
It's
deposited.
like the huge fire in a Bohemian neighborhood. They lost $300,000. 2 mattresses burned.
They often referred to Cermak Road as the Bohemian Wall Street.
Yeah.
That's a commonly used term in Cicero and Berwyn, the Bohemian.
Now, folks,
Bohemian
Now
Wall
that you
Street.
mention it, yeah.
There was just, I mean, when you drove down Cermak Road, Cicero and Berwyn, bank, savings and loan,
yeah.
bank, savings and loan,
yeah.
bank, savings and
Yeah,
loan.
now that you mention it, that's...
Well, the other cliche up there was always that the poor Bohemians live in Cicero and the rich lived in Berwyn.
What
I don't know
what
that
is that
story.
ward
I don't
where
think
the
so.
Dailies lived in?
11th
What did they
ward?
call
The
it
11th.
over there? They called it something.
Bridgeport.
Bridgeport,
Oh,
yeah.
is it Bridgeport? Oh, okay.
I think it was. I
Well,
think it was
Bridgeport is being
Canary Bird.
taken in by a lot of Chinese.
Yeah, they
big,
expanded out.
And a friend of mine who was on the job was, I won't mention his name, but he wanted to sell his house. And the Chinese came with a garbage bag full of money.
Yeah, they pay cash.
They pay cash. They
A lot
pay
of that,
cash.
started when it was announced that Hong Kong would be going back to China. So all of a sudden, a lot of investment came from there to extend
there-
Chinatown south,
Yeah.
and that's
If you
going
ever-
back how many years?
If you ever want to see something similar to that, you go to Vancouver, because of the fact that they were British colonies,
Right.
and they didn't need any real passports to immigrate to Canada. So now there's a big colony in Vancouver of
Yeah,
the
all over Canada.
Hong
Tora-
Kong Chinese.
Toronto? Huge Chinese population from
It
Hong,
was-
from
it
Hong
was
Kong. Yeah.
It was it's very similar to San Francisco as far as, you got a Chinese neighborhood and it's quite large. You go to San Francisco, you got a Chinese neighborhood, it's quite large. And seaports and all this other stuff. So it's quite an interesting.
I know Toronto has more than one Chinatown. I know that for a fact. We were there. So.
Well,
Yeah.
Chicago actually has Chinatown has got a real strange history to it, and basically they were closer to downtown at one time, and because of discrimination and other reasons, they got forced farther south, and we're now Cermak Road and Wentworth area, and they're spreading out. You go all along. Was that Southwest Expressway there anyway? You can see all these buildings going up. A lot of them are Chinese.
Yeah.
And now you have that new Vietnamese area on Argyle Street in Uptown.
I-
That's relatively
I was
new.
in
Yeah.
I was in a bar in San Francisco once. It was predominantly Chinese and owned by a Chinese. And I said, you know what I find interesting is that in San Francisco, Chinatown and North Beach, which is a predominantly Italian area, are right next to one another. And in Chicago, Chinatown and 26th Street, and that is a Chinese Italian. And in New York, there's a Chinese neighborhood right next to Mulberry, the Italian area. And I said to the bartender, I said, I find that interesting. And he said, yeah, we both have noodle.
Yeah, Marco Polo
I
brought
said, yeah, now,
noodles in,
I said, now that you mention it.
I know.
That was Marco Polo who could blame for that.
I know a lot of guys on the job, Italians. Where are you from? They say Chinatown when they're referring to the Italian section right near there. You know, so.
But the Chinese, one of the things you don't see too much in Chinatown is
Dogs and
refrigerators.
cats.
Because they'll go.
Is what?
You won't find too many refrigerators in Chinatown.
Refrigerators?
They go out 3 times a day. If you're going to have breakfast, they'll go out, buy food, come back to cook it. Lunch, they go out and buy food, and come back and eat it.
Well, that was true in Europe until the
Yeah,
20th
but, I
century.
mean, still-
women went out and got the food for each meal, and
Right.
That's
and
why
the,
you have so
the
much-
market was like the social gathering
Yeah.
area.
You got your bread and you got your meat, and I mean,
Yeah, everything
you
in
didn't,
Chinatown.
you didn't
That's why you got.
stockpile food at home.
Guys are making me hungry.
You go to Chinatown now, you see grocery stores all over the place. You know, all
Yeah,
these
but
stores.
Jack, when you eat, well, you're going to be hungry, 10 minutes later. anyway.
I'm hearing from some people that's getting harder and harder to find a bank with safety deposit boxes. That's sort of becoming extinct.
Well, why is that?
And
Any
I
reason?
find that hard to believe because even in the computer age, you want to save your auto and your home deed and title.
Well, you got your will and everything else should be held in a.
Weren't they seizing people's bank deposit, safety deposit boxes in Greece recently and that sort of thing? Gonna go on?
Greece is a really strange place. Right now. They're about one baby step short of bankruptcy, and it's a very socialized government. A lot of money going out, no money coming in.
Socialistic.
I just saw a great movie with Yul Brynner and Mitzi Gaynor, made about 1960, in which he plays an American gangster who was born in Greece but came to America when he was a child, so he has no connection to Greece whatsoever, and he's deported for his gangster activity. He's deported back to Greece.
What's the name of that movie?
I should know it too. I can't quite.
But what's great is he has
Taras
no interest.
Bulba.
He has no interest in Greece whatsoever. And Mitzi Gaynor's trying to show him the culture, and they're looking at these statues, and they come up to a statue of a discus thrower, and he looks at that and he says, "Look at this! What a country!" They put up a statue of a guy stealing hubcaps.
This
Well,
must have been a comedy, huh?
That's one of the problems that they have with the Mexicans in the United States right now. Some of the Mexicans are Mexican nationals, but they don't even speak Mexican.
Can't read it or
Can't
read it or write it.
Yeah, can't read, write, or anything else because they were never
Spanish.
taught.
Spanish.
Well, actually, it's a dialect of Spanish.
It's still Spanish.
Yeah,
It's the
well.
same Spanish no matter what.
But what's stupid is the fact that if you are born in Spain, and you immigrate to the United States, you're considered white,
You're not Hispanic.
non-Hispanic.
What's a stupid designation? Besides, what's white? There is no white race. Father Andrews gave us this in high school. An article was in the Scientific American at the time. There is no white race. There's a Caucasian race. Some are very pale. Some are pink, ruddy. Some are tan of all shades, brown of all shades, even black. Like people of India are Caucasians.
Yeah.
Well,
But they're not white.
Hispanic is not a race.
No,
I mean, that
it's a
whole
grouping, but
concept.
they
of
make
that
it into
is-
one.
In fact, I understand that when they give, they now on the census forms, people have to identify themselves.
Right.
And I think a majority of Hispanics call themselves white when they're given the option. They choose white as their race,
Well, the
because
other-
Hispanic is not a race.
White, we had white Hispanic and black Hispanic. And to me, most white Hispanics were more Indian than they were Caucasian.
Well, best example I think of this is Desi
Ridiculous.
Arnaz. I mean, the most popular TV show in the 1950s was I Love Lucy.
Yeah.
Did anybody think that Lucy and Desi were in an interracial
No.
marriage? Did anybody think of Desi as being somehow of a different race? I never got that
Well,
impression.
about Cesar
Or
Romero,
Ricardo
Fernando Lamas, who
Montalban,
else?
or
Cesar
Ce-
Romero.
I mean, I just used Desi Arnaz, Fernando Lamas, Cesar Romero. All. I don't think that anybody thought of them as being of
Well,
a different
no.
race.
Just
Well,
a different
here's the
country.
catch right now. The Chinese came over 10,000 years ago, supposedly across the Bering Strait. Now, in 10,000 years, the gene pool has changed enough that there is no real physical relation to the Chinese, although you still have Chinese DNA in your system. because the characteristics have changed. But the fact is that most so-called Hispanics were Chinese at one time.
I don't believe that one for a minute. And that happy
that-
note,
that's
on
the
that happy
proof
note, we got a
otherwise.
break, I think, don't we?
Yeah.
That's a stretch. Oh, my God. Okay.
But the funny story
Now
is,
let's have another intermission. You've been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians. We'll be right back. Henry.
Well, friends, we are now in the month of August. And of course, we still have a couple more months of decent weather, but we could still have some very heavy rainfalls. And of course, Old Man Winter is not that far away, to be honest with you. So now is the time to check your roof, siding, and gutters. Be sure the roof, siding, and gutters on your home are in good shape. You don't want mold or mildew in your attic or crawl space. Or you don't want drip, drip, drip on the ceilings in your rooms or have walls damaged by leaky gutters or bad siding. So don't have double expense. Sooner or later you're going to have to get them repaired. So call Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters at area code 630-616-1359. Mike Best will drive over in his shiny red truck with ladders on top and Best Brothers Roofing signs on the door. Mike will look over your roof, siding, and gutters, give you an estimate, and go from there. So once again, don't have double expense. Call Best Brothers Roofing for a free estimate at 630-616-1359. That's Best Brothers Roofing, Siding, and Gutters at area code 630-616-1359. Call today for a free estimate.
Now back to our show.
Jack, here I am.
Oh, Jack, it's you.
Getting back now, we had one little thing we haven't touched on yet, the different stores and the shopping.
Stores. Yeah.
Much different. Kids today, while they weren't always shopping malls, which are convenient, by the way, they're automobile friendly. But in the old days, we had little sections of town, like I can think of course, the Loop. Downtown State Street was a big shopping spot. 63rd and Halsted was a big one at our way.
Englewood.
63rd and Western. What is it? Six Corners were.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
still
Six
big. They're
Corners,
still big. but
Lincoln,
they-
Ashland, Belmont was very big.
Six
there's-
Corners had the biggest grossing Sears store of their group until the shopping malls went out in the suburbs.
Tell you what, the Hip, we go by the Hip coming over here. That is quite a shopping place.
Yeah, I go there all the
All the
time.
way around there is stores of every nature.
Yeah.
Well, the story on that goes that I think it was out in the south side anyways. They wanted to build a shopping mall in Chicago. And they had an opportunity to build across the street in the suburb. And because of all the rules, regulations, and corruption that was going on in Chicago, they ended up in the suburb.
all the red tape, you mean? All the.
Red tape, building permits.
Isn't that true of all of them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was true 100 years ago when Western Electric, the huge Western Electric plant in Cicero, I read the history of that, and the reason they built it in Cicero was they were tired of dealing with all the graft and corruption and political involvement in the city of Chicago at that
No.
time. So they came across, as hard as that may be to believe,
I'm shocked.
that the pristine and pure city of Chicago actually had a reputation for but that was why Western Electric built that huge plant right over the line in Cicero to avoid all the dealings with all the inspectors and aldermen and everybody in Chicago.
That's why Capone moved there too, didn't he?
Yeah. Well, what's funny about that story is I'm doing a little history of the Dunning neighborhood and stuff like that. and you read about Dunning Hospital, or actually it was Cook County Hospital, Asylum, or Chicago State Hospital. Originally, before 1912, it was all political hirees. Consequently, it was like a death camp, and the people in there would just basically beat up people in there or whatever it was. And actually, they had commissioned, so medical schools wanted cadavers, and they would sell cadavers out of the hospital to the schools, even though it was illegal. Before, it used to be grave robbers. Then that period of time, they just sell the bodies right out of the hospital.
Yeah. Now we're having.
So that's on our shopping.
Well, now it's a shopping center over there.
What
You
makes
got,
me-
Dunning
Well,
Square.
plus Chicago politicians could relate a lot better with mentally ill people.
Yeah, I realize that. But
So
the
is
thing-
the first shopping center in Chicago area Evergreen Plaza? I think so.
Yes, I think in the
Around
country.
50, 60,
I know it's
52.
definitely
Evergreen
in the
Plaza?
Chicago area. Yeah.
Oh, the other one was Lincoln Mall or something like that over in Lincoln Avenue, and is that?
And what's
far
the other
south?
one up toward Mount Prospect?
What,
off
Lincoln?
Of, Randhurst.
Randhurst,
Yeah,
yeah.
I think that was one of the first ones too.
Well, that's
yeah.
not Chicago though, but
No, but I'm saying leave Evergreen Plaza is
Yeah,
right
it's
across the
Evergreen
border.
Plaza, as
Yeah,
far as I know, is
I
the
know.
first, and I heard the first in the United States.
We
But I
used to
mean,
go there.
actually, like self-contained with its own parking lot. There are other,
Right.
there were shopping areas,
Right.
but the actual
right.
mall concept.
Yeah.
It used to be open air too. Originally, it was then
Yeah.
they
Oh,
closed the top.
uh,
It's hard to
haven't
believe
been there
because
recently.
today, I mean, they're like crabgrass. They're
Right.
all over.
Yeah.
It's
Too many.
and have so pretty much the same aesthetic value as
Well, there's
crabgrass.
the-
But it's amazing to think that there was a time not that long ago when they didn't exist.
What about
Well,
some of the
Arnold.
Now the
stores?
problem is they're going bankrupt. You got this one out in Markham that they're tearing down. The what's the one out on the south side?
What about
River
some of
Oaks.
the?
Mall
Somebody-
that's closed. You got Randhurst is closed. I believe it's Randhurst.
I don't think Randhurst. is
No.
closed.
No, there's
No,
one
no,
out there.
No, Randhurst isn't closed.
No.
There's one out that way. It's
Okay,
closed.
gang. Go ahead. What about some of the old stores where there Weebolts, Goldblatts, people like
yeah.
that? Those were kind of local, weren't they? Or Weebolts wasn't. That
Yeah.
was-
Five and
Kresge's,
dimes. Five and
Kresge's,
dimes.
Woolworths, yeah.
I remember Weebles. in
We had the
Oak Park,
dime stores, like
Weebles
Tom just
had
said, Woolworths,
in
And
Oak
SS
Park.
Kres-
Neisner's,
Yeah.
And
Kresge's, which exists as Kmart.
SS Kresge.
Well, Sears owns it now. And what else?
No,
There
the
was,
other way around,
Grants,
actually.
and they were real.
Kresge owns
Monkey
Sears.
Wards.
Sears
Monkey
also
Wards,
owns Land's End.
yeah.
Montgomery Wards, yeah. That
Monkey
was a
Ward,
good
yeah,
store.
Well, before the shopping mall concept, downtown Chicago, State Street, they had the concentration of department stores. It wasn't technically a
Right.
shopping
Exactly.
mall, but you had, I mean, going from north to south.
You had business
You
streets.
had
yeah.
Marshall Fields, Carson Perry Scott's, Weebolts,
Wards.
Montgomery Ward,
the fair, the fair
Sears.
store.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
The Boston
Moresby
store.
Sacks.
Boston, yeah.
Moresby Sacks.
Ronnie's Steakhouse.
You wouldn't remember that.
$1.09 steak.
Yeah.
You used to have Clee Brothers.
But
Yeah, Weebolts was bought out by a company that over-leveraged themselves. And the problem was that because of the over-leveraging, they went bankrupt.
But
Then we
before
had-
Weebolts, I think it was Mandel Brothers.
Mandel Brothers.
I
too
think
was
Weebolts
up
had
Yeah.
bought them out downtown.
Okay.
Then they of course fell off too.
Weebolts
that
seemed
was-
like they
that
had a
was the
little
reason
better
why-
class of
I remember
merchandise
when-
too.
The
Didn't it?
company that
I
bought
remember
out
when I was in
Weebolts
high
was-
school going to Weebles
Died
in Oak
because of
Park.
that,
They had a
yeah.
great
Yeah.
book section. They had a great section. You know,
Crocs and
Weebolts?
Patanos.
Weebles, yeah.
We both did.
Crocs and Patanos.
And you know
downtown.
what? These
Oh,
these
yeah, that was a big
these
bookstore.
stores all employed local people, and they were good for the economy
yeah,
of that. I remember my mother used to work at oh God, I don't know, one of the dime stores at Lincoln and Lawrence, because we lived over there. And when they went out, well, my mother lost her job.
Yeah.
I can
Went somewhere
remember
else.
on a Saturday getting on the bus and going to the Weebles, and I guess it was technically in River Forest, but we thought of it as being Oak Park and on Harlem Avenue. And then there was a Crocs and Brentano's bookstore just a
Yeah.
short
Right.
distance from there.
That was
And they had a
good
great book section in Weebles. And I mean, those stores were great. I really enjoyed.
Does everyone
going.
remember
That was also-
Alan King, the comedian?
Sure.
Yeah.
I heard about it. Of course, he's been gone for some time now, but he was talking about some of these newer type stores. He didn't mention any names. He says, and when it comes to the staff, he says, you notice I didn't say help because I go into one of them. Where's that? I don't know. Or they run the other way, or they want to they want to put in their time or whatever. But so obviously it's a case to case thing. But he hit it on the head with that one pretty
There-
much. When you
Well,
say,
what
There was a
about
place downtown called the Post Office News. I wonder if that still exists.
No.
Where you could buy newspapers from anywhere in the world.
I think it's gone.
You could buy the
Yeah.
London, Paris,
Right.
any newspaper.
The only one
New
that-
York, Los Angeles. You could buy any newspaper. Every day they would have the
the only one that
papers.
comes close to that probably now is the City News on Cicero Avenue.
Right, Cicero and Milwaukee area.
Oh, yeah, I know you mean.
Six
Yeah.
corners.
So nothing downtown. I haven't.
no.
I don't remember where it was. And
I don't
haven't
think there's
seen
a
it.
bookstore downtown anymore.
You could buy the Paris Match over there, the magazines like that, or
I used to pick up the London Daily Telegraph. I used to like reading that, and you could pick that up down.
they
at
had the
the
Menominee
post
Falls
office.
Gazette up there too. I remember that. I'm not kidding.
The other one that's missing too would be Hillman's. That was part of, usually in Sears store.
Yeah, it
and
was
they
the
had
basement of Sears.
Yeah.
Hillman's.
Hillman's?
Yeah.
and they had one
Oh, yeah.
downtown. I think it was freestanding or
Yeah.
pretty
What was
much.
that?
Hillman.
Hillman's.
And our
Hillman's.
dear
What
old
was that? What was it?
It was a food store, like specialty foods, higher
Oh,
end.
And they had a
cheese,
Sears?
fountain there?
Yeah.
cheeses and meats.
A
And,
lot of bulk food.
Anybody ever have a black cow there?
I
Black cow
don't
Sears?
remember that
Black
part.
Cow.
Yeah, it was
Oh, I
root
love
beer
that.
with a root beer
Yeah.
with a
I've heard of
vanilla float. You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, the other one that was pretty good was Goldblatt's.
And
It was-
our,
they
and
were
our
local, weren't they?
magnificent Marshall Field.
yeah.
right.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
now it's some other store in there.
Remember the big bookstore in Marshall Fields?
Oh, they had
Stamp collectors would
huge
have
books
yeah.
and stamps and coins.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, that was.
I think it was
And
the
the
third
food.
floor. It was
Yeah.
the third
Yeah.
floor.
The
Well, there was
food
one
you
of
could
the-
eat there, and
there
it
was
was
one on the
like
first
going to
floor
a
later on, I
high-class
know that.
joint.
And you could go there for out-of-town phone directories too.
Yeah.
That was
Right,
huge.
I remember that. Yeah.
And the
I love that.
sporting goods, the gun store was there.
The Walnut Room.
Oh
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Well,
That's
around
still
the Christmas
there.
tree. Yeah.
Fortunately, that's still there.
Yeah,
It's lost some of its luster, but it's still going.
Yeah.
You
right.
get that.
Like
You
I
know,
said,
I know-
what's interesting about Polk Brothers was another interesting store. And Polk Brothers, they have what, three brothers or two brothers and a sister,
Good
something like
story.
that. And they used to fight all the time.
Yeah.
And Polk Brothers stores never made any money. They made money on the stock market.
Really?
And Polk
That's
Brothers
surprising.
just loved the retail trade, so they had the stores.
Isn't there still a Polk Brothers?
No.
I remember them from the Ed Sullivan Show, the Polk Brothers. Don't you remember them?
And
Well,
they-
how,
One of the
well, how
goofy one?
about talking about appliances? How about the television guy, Madman Months?
Oh,
Do
yeah.
you remember Madman Months? Where you put the
quarter meter
quarter
bank.
meter on the
Does CET.
back of the television.
yeah, he had his own.
See-
Mohawk 4100 CET for television.
How about the Epps store?
Oh, it's still here.
Everybody thought that ABT was a made up for
Abbreviation
or
or
something.
Just the name.
But that was
Good old-
was Bob Epps. Bob Epps used to ride with us on the fire truck
Did he?
down Milwaukee Avenue. He was a friend of the captain's. And I don't. Do you remember that, John?
I sure do. My father-in-law was very good friends with him.
Yes.
John Santarki.
Great guy.
Yes.
And
we-
well,
when-
I tell you what, it's no secret. They donated a good buck
That's right,
to
to
the
fire
museum
department. Yeah, oh.
in memory of
Yeah,
his father.
yeah. And also, when I got married, all of my appliances came from App on Milwaukee Avenue.
There you go.
Yeah, and then they moved out on Oakton, and now they're in Glenview on
Glenview,
Milwaukee
that's
a
Avenue.
big store.
Big
Yeah,
place out
that's
there.
a huge-
They're still in
That
Milwaukee,
is,
though, right?
Yeah.
John, whereabouts
Still in
were they in
Milwaukee.
Milwaukee? Your
They're on Milwaukee. They're north of Gulf Road. If you go down Milwaukee Avenue, come up the
No, but
Gulf
in
Road.
the old days, though. the original
Oh,
one.
Milwaukee Avenue. Oh, geez, that was right around 43's house.
They were no, were they there for South John? I
See,
thought they were-
Armitage or something like that?
Well,
God, I don't remember now.
No.
I don't remember.
I can check on that.
That is a store to go
yeah.
to just for amusement, if nothing else. They got a
like a
huge
museum.
aquarium in there, and they got $3,000 refrigerators.
Gentlemen, you're talking about Goldblatt's. Goldblatt's is the first store that opened and was selling merchandise on Sunday. They were the first ones to start that Sunday sales. And then, of course, all your other stores followed suit because they didn't want to lose the money.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But Goldblatt's was the very first ones. And what about L. Fish stores? There was another furniture store. L. Fish's, yeah.
One of the stores. One of the stores had a big warehouse. It was a furniture store. I forgot what it was, Fish or something like that. And
J-Fish?
I don't recall, but their warehouse burned down.
Yeah, it was Goldblatt's. I was there at that fire.
That was a fire on Belmont Avenue. Yeah.
Oh no, yeah, that was Goldblatt's on Belmont and Central.
Yeah,
that's right. Ken Little was working the fire alarm office for that fire, and his son Steve was working with me running the Salvation Army Canteen radio service, because at that time the 511 Club took care of the 511 took care of the canteen service. So we had Ken up in the fire alarm office dispatching fire engines, and Steve, his son, was in my garage in Harwood Heights dispatching canteen units.
Yeah, sure, and I was at the fire, and you didn't even mention my name, did you?
I didn't know you were still alive at that time.
Well, the other thing that was sort of interesting, everybody was worried about that sign out front falling down, making sure it didn't hit anybody.
Now, there was another store, and I'm sitting here trying to think of the name of it, and I can't. It won't come to me. It was right over here on Foster and Harlem.
Foster and Harlem.
It was in the back. It was in the back of the mall there.
Yeah, it was at the L.
Yeah. What was the name of it, Bill?
God,
all right, I'll tell you a little story
Kurt
about.
Brokemer was right in there because he lived just
a couple blocks away from there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. The people that were working in this store saw there was a fire. The people that were working lived in Harwood Heights. So what they did is they went over to the firehouse on Lawrence Avenue and about Oquito, and told the firemen that this place is on fire. So the Norwood Park Fire Department, they tone out and they go to their warehouse, which is on Wilson Avenue, right around the corner from the fire department. And they come on. I was listening to it, so I'm telling you exactly the way it was. I'm listening to it on my fire radio, and they says 101 in Norwood Park. We're on the scene. Nothing showing. And they're looking around, and they sent all mutual aid companies back home. In the meantime, these kids come back from this place at Harlem and Foster and says, "Guys, the place is on fire. The place is on fire." And they said, "Well, we just came from them." "No, the one over on Harlem Avenue." Well, then Norwood Park just called Chicago, and Chicago got in there. By the time 119 and 86 got in there, the place was completely involved. Now, Bill, remember how the street went down this way and then went like this? Right at that L, that was where they had the guns and ammunition. And when the fire got to that part, it just started blowing off like crazy. Yeah. It went to a 511 alarm fire, and of course there was so much equipment there that the fire department did not realize that Chicago is on this side of Foster and Harwood Heights is on the other side of Foster. So they start hooking up to their hydrants and ran the village dry of water because they had so much water. They were pumping in. And Volkemer, yeah, he lived about because he lived over on.
Just west of there.
Yeah, just west of there. Yeah. I can see the house in my mind right now as I'm talking about it.
Yeah, there was a big.
Yep.
A big lapse of time.
And then Polk Brother Warehouse out on what is that? North Avenue. North Avenue, and just east of Cumberland. Yep. That was another huge department store fire, and the one on Central Avenue that burned down also. Polk Brothers, about Central and Wellington, if I'm not mistaken, or right around there. Yeah.
I didn't know they had a fire. They had a fire across the street from there. I know one time because there's a auto repair shop there that had a fire.
Yeah, that was.
When I was on the fire patrol, I was on patrol 7, young kid. I was like 20 years old, and we had a fire on Devon in a general purpose store. You know, we had all the clothes in one spot and whatever in another spot, and I came out. And the patrol's job was to save merchandise, right? So the next thing to hit
Turnstile was the name of the place. Turnstile, just remembered it. Turnstile. Yeah, okay, I'm sorry, Bill.
So the next time, I was going out for more covers, and I was taking stuff with me outside, and I picked up a mannequin and carried it out. Somebody took a picture of that and ended up in I think it was the Sun or whatever it was, of this. Well, if you watch Dragnet, if you watch our famous movie of the Chicago Fire Department, you will notice that one of the scenes in there's a guy carrying out a dummy, a mannequin, and that's where he got the Opie got the idea of, and everybody thought that was pretty funny. Of course, I didn't get any money out of it.
And another big warehouse that burned just right down the street from us here. That was in I know that's Harwood Heights or Nords over there, was Stark's warehouse. That was a big fire, and I got there because I lived right around this area here, and they set up the Multiversal right on Harlem Avenue, and one of the firemen says, "John, can you hold down on this Multiversal?" So I'm on the Multiversal, and they put a couple lines into it, and when they charged the second and third line, I start going down Harlem Avenue because I couldn't hold it because they had so much pressure on it. And about 4 or 5 guys from the 511 Club, Harry Ignowski and Rich Rukowski, and about 3 other guys came and jumped on the thing and helped me hold the Multiversal down. But that was another big warehouse fire that we had up in this area here.
That was a good place to go shopping. You get all kinds of crap there. I mean crap too.
Now you're talking about malls.
What more can you say?
You're talking about malls. If you want to see a row of malls, go down Rand Road from about in Lake Zurich and all up and through that area up there, right down Rand, between Lake Cook Road and Route 22, which is Half Day Road up that way. It says one mall after another mall. Trust me, lady friends, I know. I go by there every Friday and Monday morning.
Speaking of shopping, one area we haven't touched on since we're going back to the nostalgia good old days was we had our Monday and Thursday shopping nights in the city. Does everyone recall them? It was like that was the night to go.
All stores were closed at
the
5
now extinct parking meters actually ran later. Everything was geared like when I worked on the 3-wheel. If you had a late start, you started at 10, but on Mondays and Thursdays you started late, so you went until 9 o'clock. But that's not that long ago, folks. That's only 40 years ago. Doesn't seem that long in my time.
All stores closed at 5 o'clock except Monday and Thursday when you had late shopping.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a Chicago-wide tradition of Monday and Thursday being shopping nights. I thought maybe just 6 corners. But this, as you're saying, seems to be a general pattern.
I know you used to
they
say
open those 2 nights a week.
Yeah.
Wednesday was date night, they used to say. I wouldn't know, too young. Nobody ever date me, so.
Wasn't one of those nights derailed by I Love Lucy? Didn't I Love Lucy come on either Monday or Thursday night? And everybody was... I've heard this story that so many people were staying home to watch I Love Lucy that there was no shopping on that
But they were
night.
still doing it, though.
Yeah,
I know that was the tradition, but I've heard that really put a dent in sales. on
Mr.
one of those 2
Television, he was on
nights.
Tuesday night.
The other one,
Uncle Milty did
Yeah.
that too.
Yeah.
Uncle
Now-
Milty.
now you-
the other one was doing that was Amos and Andy on the radio shows.
Oh, yeah.
Now you got these shopping malls and these stores that are open until 10 o'clock on Christmas Eve, which I think is strictly ridiculous. And I think it's ridiculous
open all
that they have stores open on Christmas Day.
What they're doing
Yeah,
on
on
Thanksgiving,
Thanksgiving.
this
'cause, you know, they-
Thanksgiving fiasco.
That's the trend.
I think our national holidays now, Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving,
They're just days
all
to
that,
sell
are
merchandise.
just another day in people's in the business world's life.
Yep.
There's no more tradition and keeping these stores closed. If
Well,
you can't buy a gallon of milk before 5 o'clock on Christmas Eve, then you don't deserve to have it.
So the tradition's going to return because I believe we'll be celebrating Ramadan very
Yeah.
shortly. So,
Oh,
Kwanzaa.
yeah.
how about a jump,
right.
John, from the stores like
So
Go
don't-
Box
yeah, don't-
opening on
just
Sunday?
hang in there.
and
We'll
now
have
they're open
we'll have
all
more
week.
holidays.
Yeah.
But the other one that was interesting was the old Woolworths used to be able to go in there and get lunch.
Oh, the lunch
Well,
counter, sure.
Yeah,
Lunch
my
counter.
mother managed the lunch counter at 63rd
You know,
National for
Woolworths
for
and
years.
Walgreens, they give you a good lunch.
Oh,
it was
yeah.
very,
it, was it was great food.
I
Top
happen-
quality food there.
Yeah, things like soda fountains, lunch
Yeah.
counters, they're
Yeah.
gone.
I'll bet
They'll have
a
all
lot
the
of it
soda.
has to do with all these. Now people have to go for training, get certification. Red tape and regulations probably made it, throw it out.
Government is
Forget it.
wonderful.
What
Government is
most
wonderful.
interesting store I found so far, on Western and Addison, there's a store called Heroes. I graduated Lane Tech in '57. It was there when I started Lane Tech in '53, and it's still there. And it looks the same as it did 60 years ago.
Like a sandwich place, right, Al?
This
Sort of like a
sandwich
Subway.
place, yeah. And it's
Never been
basically
there.
hangout for the kids. They go over to eat and stuff like that. But that place is painted white. I don't know. I never was in the place, so I presume the interior hasn't changed a hell of a lot either.
But the prices have.
And the other one down the street from there was a Studebaker dealership. Remember Studebaker?
Oh, of course.
My uncle always bought those.
Kaiser Fraser.
I
Kaiser.
had one.
Studebaker
Ended up-
Packard merged.
Ended up trying to move a concrete pillar.
Well, Studebaker was a
Jumped
great
right
car.
out in front of you?
Oh, absolutely.
Studebaker
Coming
was
back from Marquette.
Studebaker was a great car. I saw one from the 20s, and that thing was a limousine. That was a huge car at that time. Packard was a cream of the crop, too.
Oh, yeah.
And that
That's the man who
down to-
owns one.
Yeah.
And those Studebaker and Packard merged to try and save each other's fortunes.
It ended up
And
American
someone
Motors.
compared it to two inebriated men trying to hold each other up walking down the street. So everything had to be changed. Like there were all different, as far as
I
the
think it ended up
production
being-
goes.
I think it ended up being American Motors, and they had Nash
No.
Wrangler.
No.
That was
separate.
Nash.
Yeah.
That was separate.
Nash.
That was a
I
different
think they went to Canada and they were doing farm equipment or something.
And then there was the old Tucker.
Could be, yeah.
That was a great car, too, when they were.
What about we
What
say
do you think of the first generation of big box stores like Community, Turnstile, Corvettes? Remember Corvettes?
Easy Corvettes.
Zayers?
Some of us talked earlier about Robert Hall. was
Venture?
their name in the early
Venture's still there, isn't it? Or are they
Oh.
closed? Venture?
I don't know.
Corvettes.
Hard to tell.
Corvettes was over there on
Kmart.
22nd Street in Harlem.
Yeah, there was one there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Robert Hall. Yeah.
Robert Hall.
That was a
When
great
the
store.
values go up, up,
Well,
up, and the prices go down, down, down.
They were good
Robert
stores.
Hall this season will show you the reason. Low overhead, low overhead. What's the other one we sing? When shampoo, which is it?
No, the other one.
Shampoo. What do you got to worry about shampoo for?
The other one I liked a
My
lot
scalp.
was
Luster
Alberto
cream shampoo.
VO5. A little dab will do you.
Brill cream, a little dab will do ya. Another one was
Road.
use wild root cream oil, Charlie. You know.
There you go.
But those all went by the wayside when the wet head went away.
Yeah.
Here's a trivia question. What was the first singing commercial?
Ooh,
Oh.
that's
It was
gotta
in the
go way
Roman
back.
Empire. It was
What?
for the Ace Chariot.
But
It was, then this would be the second. It's Chiquita Banana.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there
That does
you
go
go.
back.
I'm
Yeah,
Chiquita
the
banana, and I
came
came to say.
Banana should be ripened in the. You
No,
should
and
never
they're
put bananas in
still
the
around.
refrigerator.
I turned black.
that's like
Yeah,
United
Chiquita-
Fruit Grower
Chiquita Ban-
Association or something, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it goes back to
Banana.
World War
Lucky
II.
Strike means fine tobacco.
LSMFT.
LSMFT.
Andre
Remember
Farouche.
Lucky
Banana.
Strike
Bill,
Greens?
Bill, you used to date Chiquita Banana.
Yes,
didn't
I
you?
did. Yes, I did.
I'd walk a mile for a camel.
She had quite a hairdo.
Yeah. Well, the funny story was about.
She had a. I thought
Lucky
you were going to say
Strike
she
had
had a
the
great
greens.
appeal.
Lucky Strike Green went to war.
Yeah, and the trouble was that
And
they,
never came back.
ink they used was used in the war, so
Yeah.
consequently the ink was eliminated. It was white.
I remember my dad saying Lucky Strike Green went to war and never came back.
Now, folks, remember, this is not an endorsement of starting smoking now if you're not smoking already. Because this brings us up to the end of another happy session. I want to thank Bill Kugelman, John Kushelko, Rich
Whatever
Franz,
your name is. Yeah.
Rich Lang,
You know,
Al Opitz, Tom McKenna, and myself, Jack Ryan, and our boss, John DeVita. Remember, history is not just a book that you keep on the shelf. Until next time.
Read it.
okay.
Da-da-da-da-da.
We wish to thank Kevin of Jack FM, WRHS 89.7 FM, for broadcasting these shows over the Ridgewood Radio Network. Recordings of previous Meet the Chicago Historians programs are available for your listening pleasure via the internet on www.windycityhometown.com. And we want to thank the executive producer of Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, John Sakanda. On behalf of everyone associated, On behalf of everyone associated with our Historians program, we want to thank you for listening. This is your announcer, Rich Lang. So long until next time. A little hard to read.
You have been listening to Meet the Chicago Historians from the John DeVita Broadcast Center on the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network on Monday, August the 17th, the year of our Lord, 2015. This broadcast was produced by Jack Ryan, directed by John DeVita, and special thanks to Kevin Zeflik of WRHS-FM Norwich and the executive producer of the Windy City Hometown Entertainment Network, Mr. John Seconda. This program was pre-recorded on Monday, August the 17th, the year 2015. Until next month, thanks for listening and have a good day.